All right, welcome everyone. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day. And welcome to our day-long recognition of just that here on WURD. It's now time for the EcoWord Environmental Justice Summit. That is the reality check for Monday here, October 12th. It's all-day EcoWord. It's all-day focus on the environment, on environmental justice. We are going to be exploring the intersection of the environment with race, income, class, all these struggles we go through, and the whole mission, the whole goal today is to eliminate environmental injustice, eliminate environmental racism. We're trying to spread obviously we want to spread some love on Indigenous Peoples Day, but we also want to, more importantly, spread some awareness so we can get some action going. This is all in recognition of Indigenous Peoples Day, and we're dedicating the entire Monday to explore a variety of topics. We've got a variety of experts and panelists already. We're going to be looking at Black and Indigenous rights, what that means in terms of our, not only our rights, but also things such as income, the environment, how that all relates to the pandemic, how that relates to issues impacting Philly right now. For example, violence, gun violence is a big issue in Philly. The environment, environmental injustice, environmental racism has so much to do with that. And so we've got a multimedia virtual event that's been set up for you today. It's all throughout the day into the evening. I'll be back later on this afternoon and this evening as well. We'll be featuring insights, motivation, inspiration, solutions from the likes of Majora Carter. You've heard her on here before. Also, Ramia Cody, I think, is going to be up here a little bit later on in the 10 o'clock hour. Also, Maurice Sampson, longtime legendary environmental rights activist here in Philadelphia. Also, we got the From the Source Reporting Collaborative. We got the Oro family, activists, artists. We have elected officials who are going to be on here later on today, other thought leaders. By the way, I'm Charles Ellison. I'm host, executive producer of Reality Check. Normally, that's where you heard the theme song, Reality Check, here on WURD, but it's EcoWord Environmental Justice Summit all day today. We're also broadcast not just on 96.1 FM, 900 AM, but also on wordradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. You're watching us on WURD TV as well. I'm also founding managing editor of ecoword.com. So go to ecoword.com for more content and information and analysis there. I'll be on throughout the day hosting a number of discussions along with my colleagues, my illustrious colleagues here on WURD about the state of the environment, why it's in trouble, why this is important to our community, and how we can lead on it, because we definitely need to lead on it. Also, real quick, just want to thank our partner, Bartram's Garden, also our other partner From the Source Reporting Collaborative, and want to thank our sponsors, PICO, the Watershed Education Alliance, the Linfest Institute, and the William Penn Foundation. Also, you should try to join or renew your 4WURD membership today. You can get the free copy of this month's Black Words book selection. That is a terrible thing to waste. Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind by Harriet A. Washington is a very good read, essential read as well. So you just join or renew today. Joining me today, doing some co-hosting, co-production duties and responsible for also setting this thing up, is Janine Kayembe. She's project manager for ecoword.com. She joins me by Zoom during this live broadcast here. Good morning, Janine. What's happening?
Hey, Charles. How are you doing today?
All right. Good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks so much. Why is this important to you? So this is our second Environmental Justice Summit. We did one earlier in the year. Earlier on, we were all in shutdown phase during the pandemic, and people were in the pandemic probably thinking, why do we have to talk about the environment? Why do we have to talk about the environment, particularly when in a place like Philly, we're not just dealing still with the scourge of pandemic, but we're dealing with high gun violence too, but that's all related.
Yeah, so I think today is really important, one, to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, because whether we are in Philadelphia or Southern California, this is Indigenous land. And I feel like looking to our Indigenous brothers and sisters and how their culture lives with nature is the first step to sustainability. I don't mean like living in nature, I mean living in harmony with the different natural elements. And it's really important for us as Black people, as stewards of this land from the beginning of this country, to really see how the environment and climate change affects us now in our communities. And I think people think climate change, people think about environmental justice, and they think about the mountains, and they think about fracking, and they think about oil. They don't think about, like you said, Charles, gun violence. They don't think about asthma. They don't think about, some of the food apartheid that is happening in our Black and brown neighborhoods. And this all has to do with environment. So I think it's really important today that, we honor the people of this land, and that we honor ourselves as Black people to get into this topic real quick. Because I think that, and I said this in the newsletter, that environmental justice is just one step on the route to racial justice.
Right.
And once all of those things are in alignment, I feel like Black people in this country will have a better standard of living.
You know what? I think it's appropriate right now to kind of come up with a working definition of environmental justice, right? Or what we mean by that, because I think we're going to, as we go throughout the day, and this is going to be a total focus on the environment. A lot of folks may not be tuning in now. They're going to tune in later on, and they're like, what are they talking about? So, I mean, what is that for you, Janine? What is that working definition, like that elevator pitch for environmental justice?
Woo, that is
like when I open up the dictionary, I'm like, environmental justice, like what, I guess, like if not that working definition, what are the different elements of it, right? Like what are we talking about when we say environmental, I guess, injustice, or the way that it might be manifesting throughout, like a city like Philadelphia, which is a very distressed city, has been a very polluted city for quite a long time.
Yeah, I mean, in my perspective, I come from an urban farming and community design aspect. I'll be talking about that a little bit more in the 2 o'clock hour with Georgia Freedom Initiative and my family. But we have made the decision to leave the city because of these different types of pollutions and things that are happening. And you're seeing with environmental injustice, at least from my perspective, it starts with the food. Yeah. And just seeing, people have this term called food desert. I feel like myself and my colleagues, we really like to say that it is a food apartheid, and it is because they are keeping this food from us, specifically Black and brown people. It's not just, there's no food in this area. There's no farms. There's no fresh food. Pennsylvania is a gigantic farm state. And there's no reason why people should be going hungry. But those farmers are only farming corn. They're farming wheat. They're not farming these, multifaceted, they're not having these farms that are multifaceted. And those are the type of things where you get into pesticides, and pesticides gets into cancer, and cancer gets into all, you kind of follow the trail of the food. And that really comes back to us in our cities like Philadelphia, where folks aren't able to have access to fresh food, which then that clouds, in my perspective, when you're not able to feed yourself and within your environment in a proper way, that your food is alive. How are you supposed to care about your environment? So then things like trash happen, things like you said, gun violence. There is a certain lack of awareness sometimes in cities to look at the bigger picture of the world, because we have all these underlying conditions that are oppressing us day to day. So it's so hard to think about your small place in the world, and how you're able to be very intentional on how you live in harmony again with the natural world in order to better your community. So I think the fight for environmental justice is to, one, even get scientists and people to see that the environment is just not the greenhouse gases. It's not just the atmosphere. We are experiencing climate change on 52nd Street, on Dauphin Street, on Broad Street, Market. There are all these environmental factors that are really impacting the way that we live.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
You know,
that's just in cities, not to mention different islands in the diaspora, not to
that's right.
mention, all the different places around the world that are experiencing it in such a different way that's impacting it to the point where most people are impoverished.
Right. You know, it's if for me, environmental justice is all about protecting our homes, right? And so, I guess over the years, as we've evolved as societies, as human civilization, and we've gotten used to living inside buildings, right, or inside structures, and so that in many ways has prompted us to disconnect from the earth. But all of this, like we have to protect for environmental justice is protecting the spaces we live in and live off of from direct attack. Like when we talk about the environment and the sort of stress and distress that the environment is in, it's not some distant problem. It's the whole space that we live in and live off of. Like you were talking about the food issue, right? Well, that's living off. Food comes out of the planet. Food comes out of the spaces that we live in.
Yes.
Even the food, like even if it's fish or meat or poultry, that's food that's harvested like on the land. And so like if your home is being attacked, what do? You defend it. And so that's what this is all about. Like this whole day is about us giving the audience, giving our word family, giving our listeners, giving them tips on how to protect, how to defend your home, right? If someone's attacking your home, you go into defense mode. You try to figure out, you go into immediate emergency response mode. How do I protect my home? How do I protect my family? And the type of severe distress that the environment is going through right now, particularly with climate change, and the climate change, it's corporate made, right? Um, that's a direct attack on us. That's a direct attack on our home. So of course it's a serious issue. This is the issue of our times. And you know what? In the environment, the state, the worse the environment gets, like black people have to understand this too. Particularly, and that's why it's so important to have an outlet like Word being the first outlet of its kind to do something like this. We have to understand, like we when you look at, for example, the polling of voters, particularly black voters, during an election cycle, a really toxic, really tense, very just caustic election cycle that we're going through right now. The top issue that black voters name for this election is racial justice or racial injustice. Like that's the top issue for us. Well, this is what that's all about. Like, the state of the worsening state of the environment is going to make the racism worse. It's already making the racism worse. So we got to tackle like the climate change that is making the racism worse. Like you find the issue of the environment, you find climate change, you find issues like gentrification, displacement, they're all woven into those other tragedies that we've seen, like George Floyd. There's a whole backstory leading up to the moment George Floyd, up to the moment that Minneapolis cop who murdered him had his knee on his neck. There's a whole environmental justice backstory or environmental injustice backstory. There's a whole environmental injustice backstory to Breonna Taylor. There's a whole environmental injustice backstory to Jacob Flake. You know what I mean? So to Tamir Rice, to Trayvon Martin, to Michael Brown. That environmental injustice backstory, those attacks, those direct attacks, that direct invasion on our spaces, people or institutions and structures not allowing us to live our lives or to live decently, to live, healthy in healthy spaces. That's all. It's all tied together. So it's just so important that that's what environmental justice is about. It's the playbook for how do we protect the spaces we live in.
Yeah, because, thinking about what you just said, Charles, the way that they enact their racism is through environmental factors.
Right.
You have the times where it's like, oh, this person is, racial slurs and violence and things like that. But the main ways that they cause terror in our neighborhoods, they meaning large corporations headed up by specifically cis white males, The terror that they use are the factories, the chemtrails, the food apartheid, the non-accessibility to nature and and the environment, the lack of that type of education within our school systems. These are all ways that this racism is playing out in our day to day, every single time we step outside and take a breath of air.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
That's why it is a Black issue. It is a world issue, and I feel like we really need to get the point across that the more we fight for environmental justice, the closer we get to racial justice.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us, Jenny. We got a few more minutes with you and I, and then we're going to be bringing on Ramia Cody. She's going to come on. She's a longtime Black Indigenous activist. She's Grammy nominated. She's also going to perform for us live here on WURD. But talk about the day. Talk about just sort of describe to us, give us an outline of what WURD listeners will be experiencing today with our Environmental Justice Summit.
So I just want to start off by saying I'm really excited because Earth Day was amazing. We looked at the intersection between art and the environment, but today is really packed with people who are doing dynamic, creative work on how we are going to take back our communities and our environment and our history, our knowledge. One of the interviews I'm really excited about is with Diving with a Purpose. Tara Roberts and Ken Stewart, they have been diving around the diaspora and collecting artifacts and understanding what happened during the Atlantic slave trade by studying wrecked slave ships. We also have, folks from the community that are coming in. Again, we have Tommy Joshua coming from North Philly Peace Park. We have folks from Philly Thrive. We have that amazing conversation coming up with you, Charles, and the elected officials. Malcolm Kenyatta, I'm excited to hear about his work. He just visited some farms out in PA. So I'm interested to hear about what's going on in our state as it has to do with farming. And to stick to the Indigenous Peoples Day theme, we will have Indigenous 215 and their collective talking about their activations and why it's important to really bridge this gap between the Black community and the Native Indigenous community, and to see really that our cultures and a lot of our people have that rich overlap. We have Sarita coming on as well that will have an interesting conversation with the folks from the Big Cleanup. They've been going around the city cleaning up trash for neighbors, with neighbors, and those are young folks doing great work. So we have a really, really well-rounded conversation today around the environment, around climate change.
Right.
And I really think as the election is coming up and people are thinking about how these candidates are answering some of these questions, I hope it helps navigate their confusions around any voting.
Right, right. How do you think that's going? How do you think the candidates are answering the questions with respect to the environment? I think so I think presidential debate, the first presidential debate that we did get a couple of weeks ago, they got an F, and then the vice presidential debate, both of them got a D. Because, one, obviously you had Vice President Mike Pence. He just basically stop short of just outright calling it a hoax. Like, just go ahead, family, just be real talk, be honest. Like, you think it's a hoax. And
yeah, they have this
I don't
line
think
that's like, we're sticking to the science.
right,
like,
you're not
sticking to
you're not sticking to the science. You hate the science.
To advocate for oil, to advocate for fracking,
right.
So even as Kamala said, Joe is not stopping fracking. We just need to go ahead and stop fracking.
To stop fracking. What's wrong with that? Right.
Because it's just, so there's a lot of issues that I'm seeing, but I trust one side more than the other because they actually believe in climate change.
Right.
So I think that it is very scary. And I know a lot of our folks in our community too have that same sentiment that climate change is not real and that climate change is not within our community. So I'm hoping that folks are, like they said, sticking to the science and really getting knowledgeable about how it impacts us. So I didn't have any high hopes, but Kamala Harris does have a good track record when it comes to climate change issues and holding big business accountable to some of these.
I think I kind of, and she does, and I kind of cringed at that moment where she's saying, oh, no, you know what, actually, Joe, because to me, like Vice President Mike Pence kind of dominated the discussion at that moment. And because she should have pushed back harder and been like, no, you know what, this is the science. And Joe did not say, Joe actually we want to phase fracking out. Like we want to focus on that. And that wasn't said. So there's those cringeworthy moments, but I think overall, like we really, it shows you, it's proof that we really have to push this issue. We have to push how urgent this is, how urgent this is for our communities. I don't want to go overtime here because I know we have Ramia Cody. I think you're going to be talking to her next very shortly, Janine. Oh, I'm going to talk to Ramia. Okay. We can both talk to her.
Yeah,
right. We can both talk to her. Yeah, Ramia Cody is former Ms. Navajo. She's former Ms. Navajo. She was the first black woman, because she's black and indigenous. She's a black indigenous activist, but she was the first black woman to hold that title, Ms. Navajo. I think was back in the late 90s. But she's also a Grammy-nominated songstress. She's going to perform for us live on WURD. She's also done a lot of work against domestic violence. So long time work. So we're really privileged and honored to have her here today. I think she'll be coming on in a few minutes. I think we're going to take a break. We have Jordan Booth on with us at the Board of Steel today. So we're just going to let Jordan take a minute to give us a break. Then hopefully when we come back, we'll have Ramia Cody. She'll be joining us next, and she'll be performing here during our onWURD Environmental Justice Summit. This is special programming today here on WURD. So that's the reality check for today. It's the state of the environment and how we achieve environmental justice. So let's go ahead and take a break, Jordan. And when we come back, it'll be myself, Janine Kayembe, and our special guest, Ramia Cody, here on onWURD. Go to ecoword.com for more information. We're on 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Reverend Tyler, with November 3rd around the corner, do you know how you'll be voting this year?
Dr. Callahan, I requested my mail-in ballot, and I'm returning it the day it comes in the mail.
That's perfect, because we can't leave anything to chance this year.
Already received your mail-in ballot? You're just a few simple steps away from turning your mailbox into a ballot box. Here's how. After selecting your candidates, place your marked ballot into the small secrecy envelope and seal it. It's a 2-envelope process, so then you'll place the small secrecy envelope into the larger one. Make sure to seal that one too. Sign and date it, and then it's as simple as dropping it in your mailbox, no postage necessary, or returning it to your county election office. And if you still want to sign up to vote by mail or find out where to drop off your mail-in ballot, visit votespa.com.
I'm not waiting until November 3rd. I'm returning my mail-in ballot the day it comes in the mail.
Or you can return your ballot to your county election office.
I've got my plan. Make your plan to vote today.
Paid for by Power Interfaith.
I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
But they've got the experience.
I'm still in shock 3 or 4 years later that we're in this position now. Our democracy is at a pivotal point.
From the top, we don't trust our government. We see the trouble we're in economically. We've got 170,000 Americans dead, and yet this president will do anything he can to make it seem like things are better than they are.
I did more for the black community than anybody with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln.
It's our responsibility. If we don't lead that effort to make things better, we can't ask other people to do it. There is no good reason not to vote.
Right, we need to have individuals that are in office like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
They are our best shot to take us forward.
And that's what makes me incredibly hopeful, but we really do have to work for this thing.
To the thousands who did not vote, we need you to show up for our future and for our country.
You cannot sit on the sidelines. You gotta get in the game.
Paid for by Biden for president.
At PICO, we know one thing is certain. Times have changed. From kitchen classrooms to couch conference calls, searching for a new job or new ways to keep your family connected. These changes have become a part of our reality. That's why our teams are working 24/7 to meet the needs of our communities. So no matter how much things change, you can depend on PECO to be there with the energy and help you need to power through. Learn more at PECO.com.
It's the return of Nick Taliaferro. Catch Nick beginning Tuesday, October 13th. Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. Nick Taliaferro makes his return Tuesday, October 13th from 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. Exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Streaming live at WURDradio.com and the WURD Radio app. Or watch live on WURD TV via Facebook. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
Okay, we're back at it here for our special live broadcast, our Environmental Justice Summit. It's the EcoWURD Day. It's also Indigenous Peoples Day, so happy Indigenous Peoples Day to you. Hope you all are reflecting and observing on that. It's a very important day. And so as a result, in recognition of that, we here at WURD are bringing you our second Environmental Justice Summit. We did our first one earlier this year, well deeply into the throes of pandemic and lockdown, but we brought you on Earth Day, our first Environmental Justice Summit. This is our second Environmental Justice Summit. This is not the end of this. We continue to do that. Obviously, we've continued this project every day here on WURD as EcoWURD. Go to EcoWURD.com for more information. I believe we are joined now. We are, yes. Hi there. How are you doing? Ramia Cody is now joining us. She's a Grammy nominee. She's won multiple Native American Music Awards, and she is also the 46th Ms. Navajo Nation, and also known as one of NPR's 50 Great Voices. Also been a longtime advocate against domestic violence and abuse. She is of the Red Bottom People clan, and she's also born for the Nahili. Nahili is a new term, I believe. That means African Americans, but Ramia Cody is joining us here for a special interview, and also a little bit later on, in a few moments, a special performance here on WURD. Sister Ramia, how are you doing? Good morning. We have you on mute. I think you're on mute. Hold on. Let's see if you can click on. There we go. All right. Okay. Good morning. Good morning to you. How are you doing?
Great. How are you? Good
Excellent.
morning.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We have also still with us Janine Kayembe, project manager, our co-host for the day. All right, excellent. She's our co-host for the day for our Environmental Justice Summit. Ramia, talk about just your thoughts on Indigenous Peoples Day, how it intersects with how it highlights the environment. That's what we're all focused on today. Why the environment is so important, because we were saying earlier in our earlier discussion between Janine and I that environmental justice is all about protecting the space that we live in when it's under attack. How do you perceive this issue?
First, I'd like to say, as Indigenous people on this continent, we must nourish our kinship with our Nahili relatives, our Black relatives who are displaced Indigenous peoples themselves. Black and Indigenous people have a long intertwined history within the so-called US. Mm-hmm. Our struggles for liberation, to live healthy and dignified lives are also intertwined. And second, that poverty is not a choice. Mm-hmm. As Diné people, we didn't choose to not have water, right? To have water aquifers drained or water rights diminish, so that large unnatural cities like Phoenix, LA, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, and others may thrive. And we didn't write the US policies that continue to disenfranchise and dispossess and displace Indigenous and Black people. So right now, as you know, as the world has seen, 60% of households on the Navajo, on Dinetra, on Navajo territory, don't have running water. and the remaining 4% must haul water. And and they have to travel many miles for their families and livestock. And so resource extraction and exploitation have depleted much of our direct water sources, the aquifers, the natural springs, rivers, lakes, etc., and devastated our watersheds, and irradiated from over 500 abandoned uranium mines. And the lives and lands and natural rights of Diné and Hopi, our Hopi relatives, have been sacrificed to the capitalist economic of the Southwest, so that the U.S. may thrive. And so without coal mined, like at Zijin, which is one of our sacred areas in Black Mesa, by Diné and Hopi people to power central Arizona, the Central Arizona Project, canal systems. Again, these are all, places like, these cities that benefit from our water source here on Navajo territory. And so our territory is 27,000 square miles, in a size with only 13 grocery stores to feed over 244,000 people. And
Ramir, what can you describe for, kind of draw the map for listeners where the Navajo Nation is currently, like which states would that be within, just to give people a sense of the geography?
The state of New Mexico, Arizona, and also Utah.
Right.
And then also parts of Colorado as well. And it's the size of the state of West Virginia. So there are 10 continuously understaffed, under-equipped, and underfunded hospitals too on Navajo territory. And almost 1/3 of the homes within the Navajo lack electricity and internet and cell services. Most of these same households live on 10 gallons of water per day, whereas the average American uses 100 gallons. And so the socioeconomic conditions of life and on Diné territory exacerbates the high mortality rates of diseases among Indigenous people due to extremely limited access to clean water, polluted land, and fresh organic foods. So the crumbling infrastructures of roads and pipes and communication make the situation ripe for a pandemic breakout. So all, you think about it, all indigenous nations have been subjected to the same abuse created by the U.S. policies to deny Indigenous peoples their ability to truly undermine their own futures. So by outsourcing our kinship to these inhumane structures, we have erased any semblance of self-determination for the false promises of peace. And this does not mean that we're looking to go back, to pre-contact with European settlers. We're striving to recenter our purpose of upholding healthy and dignified lives for all, based on our concept of kinship with human and non-human relatives. And so the work that we've been doing here at our info shop, which is based out in Window Rock, which is the capital of the Navajo Nation, our work is guided by the Diné philosophy of Kehasin, right? The presence of kinship and everlasting hope. So, excuse me. So we don't, I think for us, it's, we learn, we lean on our ancestors for anything, but that's that they prayed, for life and not death, but not just for Diné people, but for all relatives above and below the surface. And so, the way we perceive the work that we also do is that we're not grieving for the world as it was before. We're guided by the flame of hope, Si Hassan, right? The flame of hope from millions of humble people of the earth, and organizing mutual aid and direct support, and I think we have to remind ourselves that we can't let, these fires, die alone, and allow it to bring us together to create a new dawn of a revolution. And so we recently lost one of, in May, from May through August 2020, or this year, August of this year, we were leased a home by a large Navajo housing entity. And it was great. Like a lot of our youth collectives that we work with from the Info Shop were working from this distribution point in Fort Defiance. And so we were able to store and package and deliver food and other critical items to the communities and hundreds of Diné families and relatives here on Dinétra, and even planted a garden. They planted, our young youth members planted a garden, and for whatever reason, this authority decided to not renew the lease, and they destroyed the cornfield that these young people had planted. And so now we're in a position where we're trying to raise that's the goal, $75,000 to begin our first stage of a long-held dream of building an off-grid commune. And so we're still providing mutual aid, but we have slowed down due to the size of our little info shop, the info shop, and which we're trying to we're trying to work with it.
I wanted to I wanted to thank you so much for that. That was such beautiful knowledge and language to put to your work, to put to perspective of how we can be with this land. I definitely want you to let us know, and our listeners know. I know you're having an event later on. And what are any mutual aid opportunities, a GoFundMe or something like that? Do you guys have that set up already? And then we would love to get you into your performance.
Okay. I actually I don't know if you all can share my page.
But I know you're on redmiacody.net. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is redmillacody.net, but you can go to the Info Shop.
Okay.
It's K apostrophe E high tone info shop, and we're on all the social media platforms. And
Great.
And all the information's there. We have a tree link of all the different mutual aid efforts that we've been working with. We've been working with the Red Nation. We've been working with Talaho One Info Shop. Also with the Defend the Community. So these
I can definitely repost those to social media to let our listeners know.
Yeah. And actually, I want to make sure we have a few more minutes, Radmilla, to get your performance. I know you were planning on delivering or sharing with us your awesome voice. So I'm going to let you have at it, because this is fascinating discussion. It's a central conversation as well. But we love to see you perform today for Indigenous Peoples Day here on WURD.
I just wanted to give a shout out to Diné Aesthetics. They wrote, I got to show you the t-shirt that they did here. Can you all see?
Nice.
They translated the Black Lives Matter in Navajo. And so I wanted to give a shout out to
Masheo.
Yeah. So Black Lives Matter. And Denebizad.
Nice, thank you.
All right, so this song that I'm going to sing is how many songs do I have time for?
I think we have time for one. One. You know what? We can do one, and then we can head to. I think we can head to break. Do we have her after the break, Janine?
No.
Oh, we don't. Okay. We just have time for one now.
So as Danae, we have this powerful system called CAT, and I shared that with you when I was talking about our relationship with Nastani, Mother Earth, the other 50 Yatat, Father Sky, and our non-human relatives. And this is our identity and foundation, and it's a system that has long been in place before settler colonialists. And it encompasses love, sihasin, hope, hajoba, compassion, hutzi, strength, right? All, and is inclusive of all people, all relatives, regardless of race, gender orientation, class, belief. And so, and this is where I think today, with seeing how everyone has stepped up and, through these mutual aid efforts, and even fighting on the front lines, for against racial injustice and environmental injustice, we will always be strengthened through kinship, through CAT.
Right.
And so, we
got you for about a couple of minutes too more. So I know we got you crunching on time, but if you could give us a couple of minutes more. Yeah.
So this is the kinship song.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah. Kevin she halagona sha away. Hey, yeah. Kevin she salagona sha away. Hey, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah. Ajobashi, halogona sha away. Hey, yeah. Ajobashi, salagona sha away. Hey, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. Halogona sha away, hey, Be'ati she halogona sha away, hey, halogona sha away, hey, Oznini she halogona sha away, hey, sha away, hey, yes, it's in she, Salagona sha away, hey,
Right. Renilla Cody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that.
Ashe.
Bless.
Thank you.
Bless.
Thank you for radio for having me on your show.
Excellent. Now, thanks for being with us this morning, Red Miller. We'll connect. We'll have you back on for another EcoWord segment. Thanks again. All right, go. We actually we're going to let Redmilla Cody go. Redmilla Cody. For more information on her, go to redmillacody.net. We're going to transition, not doing a break. We're going to transition real quickly from there to our discussion with Indigenous 215 Mabel Negrete and Trinity Norwood now join us here on our EcoWord Environmental Justice Summit. How are you both doing? Good morning. I think you're both on mute right now. All right, excellent, excellent. How are you both doing? Mabel, I'll start with you. Indigenous 215, what is that? What does that mean?
Well, really, it was like one of the co-founders, Priscilla Bell, came up with the idea of just like, because we live in the city of Philadelphia, it was sort of a play of like combining concepts, no? And also because we're very contemporary. I mean, we're urban natives, so it meant like we also, you know, some people have been born here, but also have other people have migrated. So that's kind of like in general. It's nothing fancy, but it was kind of like a way of like identify our group.
You founded Indigenous. You founded Indigenous 215 as well, correct? And
yeah, I'm one of the co-founders as well. Yes, we actually co-founded in 2017, right after we were organizing for Standing Rock. Part of it was because we needed to have a space for just Native to have a conversation about. It started with the idea of like, what kind of space do we have? But then it was like, just to get a space is insurmountable. So we were like, okay, how do we do it? Or, you know, like Indigenous Peoples Day and other kinds of activities that will bring people together first. And that's where we are, actually. We're in Indigenous Peoples Day. And by the way, happy Indigenous Peoples Day for everybody.
Happy Indigenous Peoples Day, right.
And also in Espanol, Feliz Días de los Pueblos Originarios.
What's that been like too? And before I go on to Trinity, I'm just real curious, Mabel, because you were born in Chile, right? Correct. And then you migrated to the U.S. in the 90s. Started off in the Bay Area. Now you're in Philly. So what's that migration been like? You know, particularly in the context of the activism that you do and the focus on environmental justice. You know, bringing that with you from South America, from a country like Chile. And you know, what are some of the parallels between what you experienced growing up there and what you see now here in the United States, particularly on a subject like this, environmental injustice?
I migrated in 88 to the United States in the Bay Area, California. At the time when I was moving, we were under a dictatorship in Chile. So the parallels around like issues of environmental justice.
Under General Pinochet at the time, yeah.
Yeah, Pinochet, yeah, we were under Pinochet. So I would say that the general issues that were like they're parallel in terms of environmental justice issues were Indigenous communities, and then the broader community was also, we were already sort of infiltrated by neoliberal policies and government. So the extractive economy was at the forefront of that idea of progress. And so I would say that's one of the things that it connects, you know, across the continent, actually. And that's why Indigenous communities are at the forefront of dealing and preserving, you know, the environment. The other thing that it was more personal, it was my mom, you know, because also we were under poverty. Under that agenda, and in fact, one of the things that is happening even still in Chile is that on one end you have a certain segment of the population, you know, who are like well off and within like celebrating neoliberal, policies. But then on the other hand, you have a large number of population. A lot of them are cholos or mestizos, indigenous or indigenous descent, including also now even more of like African descent, because a lot of immigrants from Haiti has migrated there, and also the people from other parts of the world. But that's something that it connects us in terms of an environmental justice issues and racial issues, no? Because it's also intertwined with racism.
It is. It is. I'm going to bring Trinity Norwood into the discussion. Trinity Norwood, also with the Indigenous 215 Collective, and Trinity. Particularly when we talk about Indigenous peoples, we don't think about an area like Philadelphia, right? We don't think about but there's Indigenous peoples, Native Americans are all over the United States, and various places. And so talk about like the role that you play with Indigenous 215, and also spreading awareness about the plight of Indigenous communities, Indigenous peoples in a place like Philadelphia, in a state like Pennsylvania. because frankly, that a lot of that awareness is just not there.
Absolutely. You know, we live in a area where historically it was much more convenient to say that there were no indigenous people living here than to acknowledge our presence. The goal in history was to eradicate us. So, you know, we walk through a city that uses Lenape words for cities, for streets and for some of our parks, but there's no acknowledge of the original people that were here and that, you know, had a historic treaty with William Penn, which is one of the first steps for creating the city that we know today. So for indigenous people, now I think not only Lenape people, but for indigenous people from all different tribal communities living here in the area, it is, you know, painful to feel like we have been erased and washed away from this city's history, particularly because we are so proud of our history. You know, the treaty with William Penn at Shakamatsin is something that, you know, we teach our children. We still ceremonially go and participate in prayer services at Penn Treaty Park to remember the things that we've done to contribute to this history that many people don't know of because, you know, it's not recognized publicly.
A lot of people don't know that you can't have Philadelphia without like the role of those indigenous communities, those indigenous peoples who were here in Philadelphia. Talk to, because you had, and Trinity, I'm not familiar with your background, but I suspect like that's the main reason you're involved with. You've also pushed, you've established Indigenous 215 network, and so talk about like a little bit of your personal story, you know, your background, how that's led to this moment, you know, making people aware, especially in Philly, that like this is Philadelphia's history, this is Philly's history. You can't ignore this. This should also be like mandatory history in Philadelphia public schools, so people know like you would not have a city of brotherly love, sisterly affection without the role that your communities played.
Certainly. I started working with Indigenous 215, I guess maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I am from Jersey, and my people are from Jersey. We are the Lenape people. So the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, even the southern part of New York is our ancestral lands.
So Lenape people, if just for our listeners' sake, how is that spelled? Like if people want to do more research on the Lenape people. Lenape.
Okay, is how you spell Lenape. Our tribal, our sovereign nation is the Nanticoke Lenai Lenape Nation. And you know, these are our ancestral lands. So I've grown up in this area, and I have always noticed how often my people are dismissed from our history. And I don't think that as a nation, we can heal from our racist past unless we start to acknowledge all parts of our history, the beautiful parts and the bad parts. And the Lenape people here have been a part of all of those things. You know, we had a positive relationship with William Penn and the Quaker community that we still recognize today and work with our Quakers. But we also, you know, have a history of erasure and removal here that should equally be recognized. And, you know, putting the information out there and recognizing that is part of our history allows that healing to begin. And you cannot have a table and move forward as a society unless all parts are represented, particularly the original people.
That's right. That's right. For more information on the Indigenous 215 Collective, folks can go to indigenous215.net. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. But just for a little bit of clarification, right now we're actually focusing on Indigenous Peoples Day, and that's like a separate organization that we founded. Yeah, so it's ipdphilly.org, and that's what actually Trinity and also Priscilla, we actually co-founded and now the board members of the organization, and so it's one of the branches of Indigenous 215. Excellent. And that's what we're actually physically, mentally, and emotionally focusing.
No, that's okay. And that website again, IPD.
ipdphilly.org.
ipdphilly.org, so folks can get more information on that. Go to ipdphilly.org to focus on, and that's Indigenous Peoples Day Philly. They've got a whole, well, there's a number of events that are happening, obviously, throughout this day. You got a whole program that's also available at ipdphilly.org. That's happening. It's happening right now. It's been going on since October 10th, since Saturday to now the 12th. ipdphilly.org for more information. We're going to have to let you both go because we ran on time. We've had Mabel Negrete, who is, I hope I pronounced that correctly, with the Indigenous Peoples 215, founder of Indigenous Peoples Day Philly, along with Trinity Norwood, who is a member of the Lenape community. Lenape, correct?
Yes,
Lenape
right.
Lenape community hailing from parts of Pennsylvania, a little bit of Connecticut, Delaware, New York, and a little bit of Jersey and Maryland in between, and also responsible for bringing us to where we are today as Philadelphia. So really, I appreciate that history because I wasn't completely aware of that history. I didn't know the name of the community, the nation at that point. I think I may have known it but forgot about it, but this is the first step. We want to bring you both back on, have more expansive conversation about it here on WURD. Thank you both for this, for taking time out of your morning to join us and talk with us about it.
Oh, Anishi, thank you.
Thank you very much. Once again, you want to go to ipdphilly.org to learn more about Indigenous Peoples Day Philly and all the activities, many of them virtually, that they have lined up for you. This is the last day of those activities. Been going on since Saturday, and the last day is today. But go to ipdphilly.org for more information. I'm Charles Ellison. We're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back on the other side, we'll be talking with urban planning strategist Majora Carter. We're going to talk about investing in sustainable Black businesses coming up next here on EcoWord's Environmental Justice Summit here on WURD 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURDradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Take care, Trinity.
They are dying. That's true. It is what it is.
Millions unemployed.
It is what it is.
It doesn't have to be. Joe Biden has a plan to get us out of Trump's mess. Good-paying jobs, investing in Black communities, and strengthening our health care. Trump might not care, but Joe Biden does. Make a plan to vote. Our lives depend on it.
Paid for by AFSCME People, which is responsible for the content of this ad. AFSCMEPeople.org. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
Recovery starts with a call. Pennsylvania's Substance Use Disorder Hotline is staffed by real people who are trained to help. They're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They'll get you or your loved one into treatment regardless of your access to insurance. If you or someone you know is suffering from addiction, call 1-800-662-HELP. Recovery starts with a call.
Paid for with Pennsylvania taxpayer dollars.
Always Best Care is a great place to work. Flexibility,
leadership, purpose,
great benefits.
There's never a dull moment.
Diversity, inclusion, compasión.
We love our jobs. If you're looking for a great place to work, you can join our compassionate Team Green. You can apply online at teamgreenabc.com or call 267-909-9248.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
WURD Radio presents the following information to help you navigate the up-and-coming election. Still concerned about COVID-19 and voting in person? Pennsylvania has you covered with mail-in ballots. Simply submit a completed ballot by mail. So long as you request that mail-in ballot between now and October 27th, go to votespa.com and apply for your mail-in ballot today. When your ballot arrives, read it carefully and follow the instructions to complete it and return it. You can also track and confirm that your County Board of Elections has received the mail-in ballot by going to votespa.com. For more information on how to vote in Pennsylvania, visit states.aarp.org/Pennsylvania. Vote early. WURD Radio presents the following information to help you navigate the up-and-coming election. Stay informed and vote. For more from Charles Ellison, tune in Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. or visit WURDradio.com.
Hi, I'm Dr. Heidi Seropoulos. If you're on Medicare,
You should know that many Independence Blue Cross Medicare Advantage plans have a $0 copay for primary care physician visits and telemedicine medical doctor visits. All our plans have $0 in-network COVID-19 testing and treatment and the largest network of doctors and hospitals in our area.
Call 833-848-0762 today. TTY-TDD 711. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or visit us online at ibxmedicare.com/doctors. Independence Blue Cross offers Medicare Advantage plans with a Medicare contract. Enrollment in Independence Medicare Advantage plans depends upon contract renewal. Independence Blue Cross offers products through its subsidiaries Independence Hospital Indemnity Plan, Keystone Health Plan East, and QCC Insurance Company, independent licensees of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association.
Hi, my name is Dr. Blake. If you're out there with residual baby fat and you want that waistline back, Smart Lipo Laser is for you at Blake GI Med Spa Services. It is affordable, minimally invasive, minimum discomfort, minimum downtime, and no loose skin. You will see results in 24 hours. Give us a call at Blake GI Med Spa Services today, 215-849-4902.
Spend your evening with Nick Taliaferro and Sincerely Sarita. Beginning Tuesday, October 13th, catch Nick Taliaferro as he returns to WURD Radio, Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m., followed by Sincerely Sarita from 7 p.m. till 9 p.m. Nick Taliaferro and Sincerely Sarita, exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Streaming live on WURDradio.com, the WURD Radio app, or watch live on WURD TV via Facebook and YouTube.
What's up, everyone? I know you know the word, no, not the station, but this word, J-O-B, that is. And our friends at Amoroso's Baking Company are hiring right now. Amoroso's has been baking the delicious bread in our community for over 100 years, and they want you to join their team today. The old and the young love Amoroso's, and they are hiring right now. Check it out. They offer fair pay and provide health, dental, and prescription plans after 90 days employment. Call 856-754-0355 or visit amorososbaking.com for details.
This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Black Talk Media. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
All right, welcome back to our Environmental Justice Summit. It is our day-long recognition, our celebration. This is our inspiration for Indigenous Peoples Day. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day to you, Philadelphia, and beyond. WURD through our EcoWord effort, through our EcoWord.com effort, our environmental justice journalism project, presenting this day long. This is our second Environmental Justice Summit. We did our first one, remember, back in April. We did that on Earth Day. We're doing this now on Indigenous Peoples Day, so we'll continue to do this, and obviously we'll continue with daily programming, daily focus and emphasis on environmental issues and how we achieve full environmental justice. How do we not just talk about it, but how do we plan for it? How do we act on it? How do we solve many of these problems tied to the state of our environment? It is indeed in a state of distress. I'm Charles Ellison. I'm your host, executive producer, also creator of Reality Check, but I'm also founding managing editor of EcoWord. Go to EcoWord.com for more information and for more insights and content there as well. And so we're actually joining us. I think we need to get her on video. You can bring your video up. Majora Carter. If Majora Carter's there.
Yes, I am.
How are you doing? All right. Urban Revitalization Strategist, MacArthur Fellow, and Peabody Award-winning broadcaster, also founder of the Majora Carter Group. Go to majoracartergroup.com for more information on you. How are you doing this morning? Good morning.
I'm great, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. You can have your video back on if
yeah,
if okay.
My video is on. I think you have to turn it on from your end.
Uh-oh. All right, we have a, let's see if we can get our, thanks for letting me know that.
Yeah.
If we can get our producer to bring her video up. Let's see if we can get that. And for those, we have video, and why video is so important today as well, because we're not just doing this on 96.1 FM, but we're also doing it on 900 AM, WURDradio.com, but we're live streaming this on our WURD TV, on our Facebook live stream, and also on YouTube as well. And hopefully our intrepid producer, Jordan Booth, can bring up your video via Zoom, because we are going by Zoom. And let's just give that a moment here. Looks like her video is on, but for some reason, the video is not showing up. Okay, that's okay, majority. That's fine. We'll unless you have something covering your webcam.
Definitely.
Okay. No worries at all. Let's just go ahead and get started. So I believe you're giving us some remarks today. You're the keynote speaker today for the Environmental Justice Summit, and you'll be talking all about the need to invest in sustainable Black business. And we don't talk enough about that. We talk a lot about supporting Black businesses, creating and supporting Black businesses, but even more importantly, making those Black businesses sustainable. Black businesses can actually be leaders in the sustainability movement.
Right. No, absolutely. So quick question, will I be able to share, I mean, hopefully I can share my slides, which would be great.
Sure, yes, we can. No, absolutely. Go ahead and share those slides while we, and then we'll work on the video portion of it, but no, feel free if you could share.
Okay, so do I make sure I've got access?
Let's see.
Oh, yeah, host disabled participant screen sharing.
There you go.
So give it to me and I'll transfer it over.
Okay. If our producer could, if Jordan, if you could somehow, Jordan, are you able to make her a co-host here on Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, are you able to refresh? Maybe we should have you refresh, Majora. We'll refresh. Maybe have you step out of the Zoom platform for a moment. I hate to do this to you, but it'll just take a moment.
No worries.
Make sure. Okay, no, I appreciate it, because we want to make sure we can see you, and we want to make sure we can see this presentation as well.
Me too.
We're gonna have you hang up and then call back in, and then we'll make sure we have everything together on our end. Okay, great.
See you in a minute.
Great. Bye. Okay, see you in a minute. All right. Once again, we are going to be talking with Majora Carter. She's going to give us a presentation about sustainable Black businesses. As we just kind of work through the technology at the moment, we want to make sure you can all see her and also see the presentation as well. Once again, I'm Charles Ellison. I'm your host. Also producer for this day, for this Environmental Justice Summit, being presented by EcoWord.com, and also in conjunction with Bartram's Garden and from the Source Reporting Collaborative. This is being supported by PICO, the Watershed Education Alliance, the Linfest Institute, and the William Penn Foundation as well. Once again, EcoWord.com. We're trying to bring up Majora Carter, making sure. We're going to go to a quick break while we work on that, while we fix that, and we should, after the break, have Majora Carter in video and also her presentation as well. I'm Charles Ellison. Let's take a quick break, Jordan, and then when we come back, we'll have Majora Carter joining us here on EcoWord, our Environmental Justice Day Summit.
All right. So can you hear me?
We can. So for some reason, we still can't see your video.
I know. I mean, my video's working because I just tried it on another channel.
Right. Hold on one second.
I'm Joe Biden, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
But they've got the experience.
I'm still in shock 3 or 4 years later that we're in this position now. Our democracy is at a pivotal point.
From the top, we don't trust our government. We see the trouble we're in economically. We've got 170,000 Americans dead, and yet this president will do anything he can to make it seem like things are better than they are.
I did more for the Black community than anybody with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln.
It's our responsibility. If we don't lead that effort to make things better, we can't ask other people to do it. There is no good reason not to vote.
Right, we need to have individuals that are in office like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
They are our best shot to take us forward.
And that's what makes me incredibly hopeful, but we really do have to work for this thing.
To the thousands who did not vote, we need you to show up for our future and for our country.
You cannot sit on the sidelines. You got to get in the game.
Paid for by Biden for president.
Need a new mattress? Stop by to see Julian, the mattress man, located at 7421 Stenton Avenue. You deal directly with the owner, Julian, to ensure the best prices on name brand mattresses like Sealy, Posturepedic. Call 215-424-5550. That's 215-424-5550.
JD's Auto Body and Painting is hiring talent for the following positions:
Assembler, preferably 2 to 3 years experience, able to tear down and reassemble all make and model cars. Painter, must have at least 5 years overall painting experience, including experience in water-based paint and able to prep cars for paint jobs. Auto body technician, looking for an A or B technician, must have at least 5 years experience repairing cars. Please send your resume to JD's Auto Body and Painting at Comcast.net. That's JDS Auto Body and Painting at Comcast.net, or call 215-848-5949 for more details. JD's Auto Body and Painting is an equal opportunity employer.
Everyone has a different journey to their vote, but we all take the same steps. If you want to vote, register by October 19th. If you want to vote by mail, apply now and mail your ballot back as early as possible, before November 3rd, or bring it to a satellite election office. If you want to vote in person, go to your polling location on November 3rd. However you want to vote, we'll help you find the way. Visit PhiladelphiaVotes.com.
Hurry, hurry, come, let's go. Time's no longer on our side. Get on board quickly, this ship is going far. Get your loved ones, get your friends, find your place and settle in. We're not staying here, this ship is going far. It's going far, it's going far. To the land beyond the sky, it's going far. Friend to heaven's glory land, we shall live forevermore. Get on board quickly, the ship is going far. Those who want and those who will, captain's looking for a crew. Everybody has a role to play. Everybody on your station, let's get this ship up and pumping. Get on board, it's going far. It's going far, it's going far. To the land beyond the sky, it's going far. To the city made by God, we will live forevermore. Get on board quickly, the ship is going far. It's going far, it's going far. To the land beyond the sky, it's going far.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDRadio.com.
All right, welcome back to our EcoWord Environmental Justice Summit here on WURD. Joining us, she's still here, is Majora Carter, real estate developer, urban revitalization strategist, MacArthur Fellow, and Peabody Award-winning broadcaster, also founder, CEO of the Majora Carter Group. Go to majoracartergroup.com. And we have her here in the flesh via Zoom here with us on our live broadcast. How are you doing, Majora? Good to have you. So go ahead and talk to us about sustainable Black businesses.
Okay, well, I'm going to start from the beginning, which is, so I'm going to share my screen. Just give me just 1 second. Share screen. And there's that. And share. And I'm going to get rid of me. Okay. Okay, great. So thank you so much for having me, number one. Be able to talk about the work that I do within the context of the topic of your show is really super important to me for a bunch of reasons, because I absolutely did start my work actually, let me start from the beginning. So first of all, so these are my parents, literally. I said I'm starting at the beginning. So this is my parents. My dad's from Georgia. My mom's from South Carolina. Actually, they met in Philadelphia, and then they got married there because my mom was living up there. But they both came up north looking for the great American dream. Both escaped domestic terrorism that was the segregation and all that. And so they came up north. But then my father kind of whisked my mother off to New York City, where they settled in the area where I was born and raised in, which is Hunts Point in the South Bronx in New York. And it was mostly white working class at that time. And predominantly, people would walk to, work, from the from the residential section into the industrial section. Lots of other folks from down south, and then also from the Caribbean, Black and brown folks, so to move up north, to the South Bronx. White flight happened. And, and that's, of course, the phenomena created by the real estate industry and housing legislation that basically told white families, blacks are moving in, so your houses are automatically worth less. And then they would essentially sell those same houses to black folks for more money. Highway construction boom happened all over the country. This is an example in New York called the Cross Bronx Expressway, near my neighborhood. And so it looks sort of like a gash because it kind of is. Underneath where the highway is now built were thriving businesses, homes, both rentals as well as home ownership. And redlining, another term that was created this time by the housing agencies that ruled the country at that point. Redlining was a term that was used to support banking and other financial institutions to let them know of areas of high risk where you weren't supposed to make any loans, and it often had to do with the presence of black folks. That was just considered a big risk, blight, et cetera. And so if you had a business or a home, it was hard for you to sell it because there weren't many folks that wanted to invest in it in terms of either investments or loans. And I grew up in 10474 in that area. And this is me. I was about 5. I like to think of this as like an early networking opportunity. I was in, so I'm sure I was talking to Santa Claus, during this time, saying, I'm here with the Easter Bunny who says I've been really good, so hook me up. But this is what I grew up with. All the financial disinvestment, between, lack of access to capital and loans, and all those things made it so that landlords in many cases felt the need to commit arson, literally what they paid somebody else to commit arson. But basically because they knew that they weren't going to get any kinds of loans or other financing to support their businesses or their properties. So they would have their buildings torched to collect insurance money. And this is the South Bronx that I grew up in. This was starting in the late 1960s, early 1970s, all the way up to the 80s. But all that financial disinvestment led to what became the environmental problems that we deal with, even some of which to this day. We handle an enormous amount of the city's waste infrastructure and sewage treatment infrastructure, power plants, and lots of diesel truck trips, because many of those walk to work communities where there was lots of light industry that created jobs, then they just became places where this kind of infrastructure existed. But what's interesting about these communities is that there's this often this feeling that nothing good is actually either coming from them or in them, and it's absolutely not true. These are the people in my neighborhood. They're doctors, they're entrepreneurs, they're lawyers, they're daycare workers, they're people who run all sorts of businesses, and they're there in our own community. The woman on the left in this photo, the Coze with my Rose t-shirt, her name is Noelle Santos. She actually started what was the first bookstore that we had in the South Bronx in more than 5 years. She also coupled it one of her favorite passions, which is wine. And so it's called the Lit Bar, as in lit for literature, lit for tipsy. And, and it's this really successful project also right here in the South Bronx as well, homegrown girl. The gentleman in the middle picture, about down in the middle, in the bottom picture, is a young man named Christian Navarro. If any of you have young kids or youngish kids, he was in a Netflix show called 13 Reasons Why. He played Tony Marrero and is still acting, and he grew up 2 blocks away from me. The top guy, if any of you are into celebrity chefs, the guy with the baseball hat on the right is Marcus Samuelson, who's got a Red Rooster in Harlem and a whole bunch of other really amazing restaurants, and is just a really, really awesome guy. And yes, he comes to hang out with us. And then but with all these kind of things to say, we're often led to believe that people born and raised in our community are, measure success by how far they get away from them. And that essentially creates brain drain. And we do know that to be true because there's often that kind of feeling. And so for kids in my neighborhood, since we're led to believe that you have to grow up, if you're going to be somebody, then you get out of the neighborhood, then that's what we're taught, in no uncertain terms. And so, But what's important to note about our community now is that just over the past 5 years, we've had more kids graduating high school and going to college than we've had in the past 30. So it's a great big thing. We're awfully proud of it. But it was interesting, but we tried this little experiment. So we asked these young people, this is just a representative sample, well, what do you think our community needs right now? And they would say things like, oh, well, we need more homeless shelters. We need more, affordable housing for really, really poor people. We need, more programs for the kids. We need stuff like that. And then, then we'd ask them, so what do you want to do? You're going to graduate and go to college and presumably get a good job. Are you going to come back to a neighborhood like this? And they were like, no, why would I do that? This is not the kind of place I want to be, or any place like it. Because to them, all the things they talked about before were markers of poverty and things that they didn't want to have associated with them. But if you listened and looked at the way our communities like ours were treated, whether both from inside and outside the neighborhood, it was almost as if you stay in a community like this, then you're sort of damning yourself to a life and a lifestyle that was just well beyond the ideas of what a good life could be. And so for them, it was just like, no, of course I'm not going to be here. So because philanthropically, there are all these programs, the government has all these programs, to support, the bright kids in our communities to leave. And expect them not to and reinvest, their time and their talents into our own communities. And so I thought that was really kind of fascinating. It was almost as if poverty in and of itself was a cultural attribute. People were looking at us, and even people in our own community were kind of thinking, well, poverty is just a part of our culture. And it was just like, well, that's kind of interesting, because it's almost akin with neighborhood preservation, because it's kind of like what we do with all the programs that are put in places like the South Bronx, poor communities of color, are generally the type of kind of things that we make life easier for the poor people that are there, assuming that they will never be anything but that. So we decided to ask people, do you think that poverty is just a part of our being? And we couldn't just say, is poverty a cultural attribute? Because that's kind of wonky. But instead we asked them, what are you looking for in the community that you desire? And we were not at all surprised when we discovered that survey-wise, nobody wanted the things that were readily available in the community, from the health clinics and all the community centers. Some people have issues picking up after their dogs. What they wanted were the kind of things that they would leave the neighborhood to experience, the kind of things that middle-class people have, coffee shops and restaurants and nice parks, things that match their income. They were excited about things like that. But interestingly, but they saw no value, in our own community. But just because we don't see the value in our own community doesn't mean that other folks don't. These are literally notices that I get. I've gotten underneath my door. I get them at least a few times a week. They've gotten my cell phone number. These are predatory speculators, assuming that I don't know the value of my own house and expecting me to sell early and cheap. And so I really do believe that the reason why, gentrification doesn't start happening when you start seeing, white people and coming into a community, or it's when doggy daycares and things like that. What it really happens is when we are led to believe that there's no real value in our community, and we act accordingly. We flee whenever we can, or we sell our own property whenever we can. But still, I think there's plenty of hope. So, for example, when the predatory speculators put these signs up, we'll just take them down, literally. And what's so interesting is that, when we posted this up on social media at one point, someone from Baltimore wrote in. We got a really nice response, and this one was one of my favorites, which was, when we get mail offering to purchase our property, I have my children call them back explaining that this is their inheritance and it is not for sale. So I was like, that's how we want to continue to think about rolling. But another thing is, in particular, about gentrification, which I think, it's a triggering word for a lot of people, and I'm not saying that it isn't an issue. It absolutely is. But also, let's kind of understand a couple things. One, a lot of it has to do with just the basic law of supply and demand. We are not building, different housing in different income brackets to match the kind of need that's out there right now. And so the reurbanization of America, where you've got kids as young as millennials and folks as old as baby boomers, all wanting the same things in communities, and those changing neighborhoods, where you've got public transit and you've got access to cute shops and you've got, you don't need a car to like move around. Both of those groups want the same thing. And guess what? Those places are the changing, rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods that kind of look like mine. And many places in Philly too. So those developers and the predatory speculators that work with them know exactly what they're doing, and they work on it and they make it happen in support of those folks that can afford to pay for it. So, but in those neighborhoods before they change, these are the type of things that you find. Like, these are just pictures from my neighborhoods. Like, we've got, sort of greasy spoons, I love Kennedy Fried Chicken. I'm not gonna lie, but they're the best French fries ever. But, but there's not a diverse, array of healthy food options. And then there's definitely local economic developments, but they're often not locally owned. And in many cases, the quality is super low and makes you wish that if you could afford to go someplace else, and not even afford to go, because a lot of these places aren't even cheap. But if you have access to get someplace else to buy stuff, you do. I like 99-cent stores as much as anybody, because you never know what you're going to get, and it's always pretty much a bargain. But ultimately, if this is your only retail opportunity, we've got 3 of these within 3 blocks. It's kind of like we'd like something else. Pharmaceutical industry. It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Much of it has to do, and the reason why it's so big is because often the lifestyle issues related that plague communities, poor communities of color, diabetes, obesity, heart issues. And so we've got ways to medicate people like that. And then you also have ways to get self-medicated. Again, lots of these taking up a lot of the commercial area within our communities. If you want to save your money, chances are it's going to be really hard for you to do so, because banks and other, whether credit unions and other kind of financial institutions that help you grow your money are not in communities like ours. But you'll find lots of check cashing stores and pawn shops and rent-a-centers and payday loan centers too. And last, definitely not least, lots of very highly government subsidized affordable housing for very poor people. And before anybody says, oh, Majora Carter's just got this thing against poor folks, absolutely not true. What is true is that I do have a problem with the concentration of poverty, which then creates even more problems for folks that are poor, which means that they have lower health outcomes, lower educational attainment, higher rates of people being involved in the justice systems and their families being affected by it, higher rates of unemployment, of just you name it. But mostly there's a lack of hope that I think has an impact on the way people see themselves and view themselves in the world. And it makes us all feel like there's something just a little wrong. And we are still troubled with that right now. And so one of the things that our approach to real estate development has been like, well, first of all, let's recognize that our community has never had a loss of talent and amazing people born and raised in them. What we have a problem with is keeping them, because we've been led to believe that you measure success by how far you get away from our communities. So our approach to real estate development is something called a talent retention strategy. It's the same thing that any good, any smart company does. When they hire somebody, they pour resources into that person to keep them, so hopefully they'll stay at the company. And so imagine if we thought of our communities as companies and then invested in the people that were born and raised there so that they would in turn invest in our own community. That would create a stabilizing force in our communities. And that's where I believe, so much of the civil rights, work of the early civil rights work and where local businesses were a part of that. That's what it was all about. So, but going back to how we use it in the real estate world, it's got to be places that make people want to stay in their communities. They need to be beautiful. They need to be high quality. They need to have commercially viable year-round social spaces. They promote community, but it doesn't feel like a community center, which most people associate with little kids and arts and crafts. It's got quality housing at different ranges of income. And absolutely does not conflate poverty as a cultural attribute, but it is a place where people find themselves, and with given the proper resources, they can move out of it as well. But to start, I did start my work, on the environmental front. Our neighborhood was about to go through, the city and the state were planning on building another huge waste facility on our waterfront. We started to think about, well, what are we fighting, not just against, but what are we fighting for? And so we got a very small grant, just $10,000, to support work along the Bronx River and, to help do some restoration on it. And we used it mostly to do cleanups and to pay for lunch for our volunteers. And it was a really kind of incredible, process. And then we were able to help, create the opportunities there so that people could see that it was a dump actually. And so by transforming, that place into something that was a community resource, whether for parties, for environmental stewardship, for boat building, for community rowing, we were able to sort of like raise the bar for what could be, an environmental and as well as economic and educational resource in our community. And this is me, because I love this photo, because this is us at the groundbreaking, where we were getting $3 million to actually transform that park. Mm-hmm. And it went from this little beta version, went from the dump first to this is our beta version to this, which is the Hunts Point Riverside Park. And, and it's actually won national awards for excellence in urban design. And it's become this great place that the community sees itself sort of like tied up into, which is a really great place. And it's actually, my dog is the one that helped me discover the park, because I don't think I would have walked into that dump if I'd not had an 80-pound dog, literally with me as I went on my morning jog. So I got married there also, by the way. My dog was my flower girl.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's all
yeah,
right.
And she totally
Beautiful.
was. I've got like 12,000 nieces and nephews. And I was like, this way I don't have to choose. And so that was great. Then I started, people in the community, we took tons and tons of surveys about what would make people want to stay in the community. What were they looking for again? And so one of the things was just like, a Wi-Fi cafe. Right. And we were like, okay. We tried to get an operator to build one. Nobody was coming because everybody heard like, oh, there's people don't do specialty coffee in the South Bronx and blah, blah, blah. And so then we actually did it ourselves. And so we actually got a partner, Birch Coffee, which has like a roast house and now over a dozen different coffee shops, in Manhattan. But then we realized that we had to sort of add some South Bronx flavor to it. We rebranded ourselves. We called ourselves, we're called the Boogie Down Grind Cafe. And, and it's an homage to, the South Bronx and its roots of being the birthplace of hip hop. And so we're super excited about that. With all the decor is all about the early days of hip hop, and we took like urban archaeology, all the signs from when, from the neighborhood, from when hip hop was actually born. And it's just become this gathering spot. We do open mics, karaoke, community meetings, all sorts of really fun things. But honestly, what we thought we were doing was reclaiming the South Bronx and coffee, as the blackest beverage on the planet, frankly. I get so bizarre about thinking about how, that specialty coffee is this like super white thing. And it's just like, it comes from the blackest and brownest places on the planet. Right. Okay, we have a little retail.
That's right.
And so let's have some retail love here. How about we do that and build some businesses around it? And so one of the things that we did, and I was really fascinated by this term called self-gentrification that the president of Johnson C. Smith University, which is a historically Black college down in Charlotte, used to describe the way that the community and the college and the financial institutions were working to redevelop, the town right outside the college campus. And there were, of course, some people who were like, oh, they saw development and they were like, oh, this is terrible. They're coming to gentrify us. And he was like, look who's doing the development. It's people from your own community. So this is, if anything, it's self-gentrification. It's not gentrification, because this is development that's by us and for us. So anyway, I was quoted as using that word. And then there was a little sticker campaign that happened. A little sticker campaign where they used that quote, and it was attributed to me as a local sellout, for starting a coffee shop. And I was just like, you do realize it's 100% locally owned, but they didn't care. And they didn't care further when they actually, accused me of selling out the South Bronx. This was a protest that we had, or that they had against us. Majora Carter sells out the Bronx one coffee at a time. You get this is literally what was interesting, what was happening. But what was ironic was the day that they decided to protest us was the day there was 10 people outside with big banners, and then there was about 40 people inside the cafe.
Thank you for the smiley faces there too. So you're on family friendly radio, right? No, I appreciate that.
It's true, exactly. So as you can see, you got it. And but we had about 40 people inside who we had assembled because we were offering a workshop for 0 and low interest loans for both business owners and local homeowners to make sure they stayed in their homes. So the irony of it was not lost on us. But again, if people aren't willing to like make the move to engage in a real productive conversation, they'll believe anything they want. But what we know for truth is that there were people like this woman and her family who were able to invest in the coffee shop as well. This is another spot where we were able to acquire this building. It's an old rail station, and when it became abandoned, we were able to acquire it. Hired some kids from the community to take advantage to do a community mural on it, which was great. And now we're working on it specifically so that we could. This is what it looked like when it was first built back in 1910, and. But the idea is to transform it into an event hall so that you can do concerts there and tech events and weddings and all sorts of events. And we're even using it as an opportunity to open it up for local real estate investment as well, because, thanks to changes within the Securities and Exchange Commission, now unaccredited investors can actually and go into real estate development projects for as little as about $100. So it's a super exciting thing that I think is available for folks as long as we put it out there. And this is the last thing I want to talk about, really, and it'll be really, really brief. This is a former juvenile detention facility that I was able to convince our last mayoral administration to look at, as a site for the kind of mixed income housing and mixed use commercial development that could really raise the bar for what passed for local economic and housing development in our community. And so the idea was to use the site as a catalyst for mixed income housing, including supportive housing, but then create kind of like economic diversity in housing. So you're not just concentrating poor folks upon poor folks and then, adding, and creating all and continuing to exacerbate all the problems that are associated with poverty. And then also looking at what are local economic development growth trends in terms of job creation and business development. And in the case of the Northeast, definitely, light manufacturing in terms of food, apparel, and technology, community space, because we know that that's specifically a way for people of many different incomes to get together and hang out, and commercial and retail, because you want a local living economy. You want people to spend money in their community, and money stays in the community. This is just an example, because what we see, you have the housing, quote unquote housing, which is the jail on one side, and then the other side, which is a truck engine reparking, parking lot and all sorts of things like that. But it was a very lonely stretch. Mm-hmm. And but what we knew is that anybody in the neighborhood knew that this is the kind of place where we saw things like, truckers going to pick up a prostitute. But imagine if you really redeveloped it so that there was like housing and residential, housing and local businesses also on that ground plane. So you have a 24-hour street where good users will drive out bad ones. And again, we wanted to raise the bar for what passed for housing and local economic development. And so we put together this amazing team, more local and women and minority developers, each with an equity stake, not just like acting as subs on a project, but real equity people, on this project. We combined about 1,200 units of mixed income housing, at least 100 units of low income home ownership through Habitat for Humanity's New York City. We had about 800 jobs associated with the light manufacturing, as well as the commercial and other retail projects here. And so we put together this team. We thought it was amazing, and a local community did as well. But our city, in all their infinite, sort of usual wisdom, just decided to work with only two white male development teams. They did hire some Black architects, et cetera, to work with them, but ultimately that was it. And basically it's a low income housing project with no real jobs associated with it. And I'm going to leave you with this quote from Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail, because it really does speak to, we have a legitimate and unavoidable impatience to create the kind of communities that really do make us believe that we do not have to move out of our neighborhoods to live in a better one. And that is me. Thank you.
Thank you, our Majora Carter, our keynote speaker for the day here during our WURD Environmental Justice Summit. For more information, Majora Carter Group ecoWord.com. Also, Majora, I believe you're going to stay on with us. We're going to take a quick break. And then after that break, Majora Carter will be joining us on a special panel that we'll be convening. I'll be moderating. We've got also your colleagues, your fellow roundtablers, panelists. They're also in the waiting room. They've been waiting patiently in the Zoom environment. We're going to be talking with Maurice Sampson, longtime legendary environmental activist in Philadelphia, and also Professor J.T. Rohn, who is founder of the Black Ecologies Initiative at Arizona State University. So they'll be joining us very shortly for our Pioneers in the Environmental Justice Movement Summit panel and our ecoWord Summit panel. That's going to be coming up next after this quick break here on ecoWord 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURDradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
COVID-19 impacted a lot of things this year, including regular vaccination appointments. Vaccines help protect you and everyone around you, especially during flu season. Schedule an appointment with your healthcare provider today to make sure you and your children are vaccinated. Vaccines keep us safe, and they work. Skip the flu this year. Get your vaccination today. Let's stay protected together. For more information, visit health.pa.gov, paid for with Pennsylvania taxpayer dollars.
Enterprise Exterminators, located 4943 Wayne Avenue, specializing in lantern flies, termites, bed bugs, fleas, mice, and roaches. Do-it-yourself kits are available. Call now, 215-849-7070.
Reverend Tyler, with November 3rd around the corner, do you know how you'll be voting this year?
Dr. Callahan, I requested my mail-in ballot, and I'm returning it the day it comes in the mail.
That's perfect, because we can't leave anything to chance this year.
Already received your mail-in ballot? You're just a few simple steps away from turning your mailbox into a ballot box. Here's how. After selecting your candidates, place your marked ballot into the small secrecy envelope and seal it. It's a 2-envelope process, so then you'll place the small secrecy envelope into the larger one. Make sure to seal that one too. Sign and date it, and then it's as simple as dropping it in your mailbox. No postage necessary, or returning it to your county election office. And if you still want to sign up to vote by mail or find out where to drop off your mail-in ballot, visit votespa.com.
I'm not waiting until November 3rd. I'm returning my mail-in ballot the day it comes in the mail.
Or you can return your ballot to your county election office.
I've got my plan. Make your plan to vote today.
Paid for by Power Interfaith.
As a business owner, hiring and developing people from the community that your company serves is one of the best ways to show commitment to that community. Let WURD Radio help with Livelihood, our new initiative that connects Philadelphians with companies like yours. We'll feature your business, open employment opportunities, and resources to connect your company with talent and ensure that you reach your target demographic. To learn more about how Livelihood can help you build your team, visit wordworks.com. That's WURD works.com. Livelihood is supported by the Nightland Fest's Local News Transformation Fund, Borealis Philanthropies Racial Equity and Journalism Fund, and the Solutions Journalism Network. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
All right, welcome back to our ecoWord Environmental Justice Summit. Go to ecoWord.com for more information. I'm Charles Ellison, by the way. I'm your host, producer for the day. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day, by the way, too. And don't forget to go to ipdphilly.org for more on Indigenous Peoples Day ceremonies and celebrations. A lot of that happening virtually, unfortunately, but they are still moving ahead. ipdphilly.org for more on that. Let's head into our Pioneers in the Environmental Justice Movement panel. We have Majora Carter. She's still with us. Gave us a very enlightening, informative presentation before the break. So we really appreciate that, Majora. Thanks so much. And let me also introduce our other roundtablists, our other panelists joining us here this morning. We've got Maurice Sampson, longtime legendary grassroots environmental activist and strategist, Philly-based, also a longtime unsustainable waste management expert. He's got about 30 years of experience in the environmental and recycling advocacy space. He's also an entrepreneur, and he's a volunteer chair for the Recycled Now Philadelphia campaign. How are you doing, sir? Maurice Sampson, thanks for your patience, too, in the Zoom waiting room earlier. And out on the West Coast is Professor J.T. Rohn, founder of the Black Ecologies Initiative. We had him on about a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you know what, he'd be perfect. He'd add a perfect perspective and voice to this panel. He's based at Arizona State University, a professor in African and African American Studies, but establishing the Black Ecologies Initiative with his colleagues, and he joins us here. Go to @JT R-O-A-N-E on social media, on Twitter, for more insights and engagement there. How are you both doing?
Doing very well, thank you.
All right, excellent. Okay, great. We got James off of. Maurice, I'm going to start with you because we have Majora give us a fantastic presentation. I'm sure you heard much of it. But we're talking about leadership in the environmental justice movement. We talk about the leadership that makes an environmental justice movement. And so talk about how you define environmental justice. When you think about that, what is it, particularly in the context of what you do currently? Like, talk about that current role, how it contributes to the cause of environmental justice and what that means to you.
Well, certainly, and I should start really by saying, I am, what pays the bills is I am now the director of the Eastern Pennsylvania Clean Water Action Chapter, which is based here in Philly. It's an organization that I previously was on its board for 25 years. And I came here originally consulting because I work in waste is what I normally do. And they needed a director. Mm-hmm. So I came in as a consultant, and then while I was in that process, Mr. Trump got elected, and I thought maybe I should stay here for a few years. Activism, environmental activism, was something that at the beginning of my career I deliberately decided not to do because I honestly didn't feel like arguing how much pollution is acceptable is a way to clean up the environment. Either you clean it up or you don't.
Right.
And, we have a system that is designed really that looks at clean environment as an argument. Depending on who the lawyers are, one day you're arguing and you win for the environment, and the next day you don't. And winning for the environment is not an argument. It's something that we simply have to do. So I had literally decided not to do activism, but to do what is now, it's over the years been called different things, appropriate technology at one point, and sustainability at another. But I picked waste because, you either do it or you don't. You either recycle or you don't. Mm-hmm. There's no ambiguity there. It either happens or it doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. So that's where I sort of focus my career work. Now, to answer your question directly, I have floated over the last 30 years. I'm part of the traditional environmental movement. That's where I grew up. Mm-hmm. I started in November of 1969 when I was 15 years old, and I very deliberately picked this as my career path. And I have to tell you, when I first got on it, the Malcolm X wannabes around the campus would all approach me asking why I was doing that white man's work. So it was not an easy place for me to stay. Those very same people came to me 5 years later working for the energy offices, excited to see me because now they wanted to figure out how to do their work. So I've been in the right place. Environmental justice, I think, was defined really out of the Church of Christ and the work that was done with the Toxic Waste and Race Report in 1987, and I hold to that. That report correlated the presence of waste and hazardous waste facilities, the demographics with being located in Black and brown communities. I like to tell people that environmental justice was a term that came out of that, and that for me, an environmental justice organization is one that either is of or works for people that are in Black and brown communities. And I see a lot of appropriation of the word environmental justice in the environmental work that we see, but there are very few what I call real environmental justice organizations. I worked for a traditional environmental organization. I have an environmental justice project that I do, where I have hired someone, a young woman, Quinita Kendrick, who has her background in public health, who runs my environmental justice work. And that work is focused on the Black and brown community. One of my missions at Clean Water has been, what is the role of a traditional environmental organization in working with the Black and brown community? That's been my focus here in Philly. We started with lead, and we are now going to pivot and work with water because silly me, I thought that lead was how I talked to people in the community of color. And when I surveyed them after doing the work for 2 years, they said, Maurice, we want to know about the environmental issues. Climate change is here now.
Right.
Not yesterday, not coming, it's here now. How come the only thing we know about environment is when they came and painted fish on our sewer grades?
Right, right. And Maurice, let me go to, and thank you for that, and too, because that's important to know that background. Professor Rohn, for you, what's like your working definition of environmental justice, and so that it's not perceived as what many people still to this day refer to as white people's work. You know, like that's what Maurice Sampson was saying earlier. Even back then they were calling it that, but even to this day, even with a lot more awareness around how significant and how crucial this issue is in relation to especially Black communities, Black and brown communities, how do we make that definition more workable and relevant for those communities that are the most impacted? And that's why you created Black Ecologies Initiative.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here with these folks and having this conversation. I'm really focused around two issues in relation to environmental justice, and I think they're related. The first being food sovereignty, and the second being the cessation of fossil fuel use. Those are the two primary prongs that are of interest to me. And I think in all of not only in the African American communities, but also in indigenous communities within this country, and then Black communities around the diaspora, these are two primary issues. And I think they are, of course, highly related to one another. How we feed ourselves primarily in the current moment is oil driven. And so those things are related. I think for me, environmental justice really has to include all of the kinds of issues that have already been laid out on the table. In 1970, Nathan Hare, as early as 1970, Nathan Hare was talking about Black ecology as something that requires us to think about housing, that requires us to think about schools, that requires us to think about a totalizing view of social and economic relations to truly understand environmental justice. And I think we have to push back against the kind of whitening of environmental justice. Much of that, first of all, does not get rid of some of the primary relations of domination that created the world that we currently inhabit. Yeah. So I think conservationism, for example, starts in the context of the British Empire. It really is driven by the desire to maintain forests in Southeast Asia and other sections of the world to later exploit them, right? Not to undo the kinds of relationships of environmental domination, racial domination that go hand in hand. So for me, and I think Black communities have always been sources of vital knowledges that counter these tendencies towards domination and dominion. I think, since at least slavery, right, Black communities have fought against enclosure, have fought against this sort of, often in furtive, small ways, have created sustainable forms of life in the context in which, for example, plantation owners sought simply to just extract more and more wealth from land. So I think those kinds of practices in Black communities aren't just the kind of informal, but we have June Jordan in the early 1970s, along with Buckminster Fuller, was proposing some of the things that Majora Carter is talking through in relation to Harlem, right? Building a sustainable new Harlem that would have included and not displaced anyone, but which also included a green corridor. Or Fannie Lou Hamer and food justice in the early 1970s, creating a pig bank in Ruralville, Mississippi. So I think we have the whitening of environmental justice is actually, it's taken a lot of work to make it that way, right?
Yeah, I'm going to go around the round table, go to Majora too, because you went a little bit into this in your presentation earlier before this panel, your keynote presentation, and I want to have an opportunity to get this from all three of you, but I'll start with Majora. Like, what prompted you to get into that environmental justice work, right? What was it like that moment? I don't know, maybe when you were a young person, you saw something, you experienced something that said, okay, this is what I want to get into. This is what I want to lead in the space I want to make a change in Majora.
Yeah. So first of all, thank both of you for just, I'm so glad I got to follow you because you just gave me so much food for thought. And, you know, I got into it, you know, because again, I was one of the kids, like a smart kid from a community like the South Bronx, led to believe you got to leave. And I did use education to get out. And when I came back home, because I was broke and I was going to grad school and I need at NYU and need a cheap place, which was my parents' house. Literally, that is the only reason why I came back home. But that's when the city and state were trying to pull off this huge waste facility, an additional waste facility. And I had this, and it was a very particular moment where it was just like, wait a second, I can pretend that I don't see this and nobody would blame me. You know, because I'm the smart Black girl, you know, from the South Bronx who did good for herself. You know, she's getting a graduate degree. She can get out of here. No one's expecting me to stay. But I was just like, I can't not. I mean, like, look at what's happening. Look at what's already happened. And now we're being told that we're going to just not even feel the impacts of another 5,000 truck trips a day. We're like, seriously? And so I was just like, so that's literally when I started. But to your points, you know, James and Maurice, I mean, this whole whitening of the environmental movement, it's just like, you know, all of, like, whether we're from the Caribbean or from down south, like the land was something that was so much a part of what we did. My father's sister in our little backyard, who lives upstairs from us, up in the South Bronx, she had a little plot in our backyard where she would grow herbs that she would give to us when we got sick. Before there was anything, before my mother went to the doctor, she called out Marie. You know, like two of my favorite, you know, people in the world, Frank and Audrey Peterman, literally wrote books about the legacy of people of color on the national park system here in this country. From, you know, for Black folks, Latinos, you know, Native Americans, all of us had something to do with what is considered like the last bastion of white hope. I mean, but that is like just the personification, you know, of how effective white supremacy actually is. Like, it literally forces us leads us to believe that somehow our legacy on the land, that our understanding of the way that the environment feeds us or could feed us is something that belongs to white people. Like, it's just mind-boggling. But every single day, like, I'm touched with that, and it just drives me completely insane. So yeah, it's like, I remember when I started as an environmental justice activist, and white folks, they would love to have me come talk at their shows, and they'd call me the environmental justice activist, and I was real quick to say, I'm an environmentalist, just like you. You might do conservation. I do environmental justice, which is as valid a part of the environmental movement as conservation is. Thank you very much. So stop trying to like ghettoize me and everything that we do. No, you need us even more than you think we do. You do.
Right. Maurice, I can remember that moment in my childhood where I became very aware of my surroundings, the environment around me. When I became very concerned about the state of the environment, I just couldn't articulate it as an environmental justice moment or an environmental justice issue. And so, Maurice, what was that moment for you?
Well, I mean, I was in high school at the time, and I went to an all-white high school in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, when it was a very white community. And didn't have any realization of how isolated I was, literally until I got married. I moved to Mount Airy, New Jersey, and Mount Airy, Philly, and learned what it was like to live in a Black and integrated community. I didn't understand that until I had my children.
Wow.
I had no idea I was as isolated as I was. And when I was 16, you know, I always tell people, I see the world from here out, not from out in.
Right.
My father used to frequently say, you don't even know you're Black, which terrified me because I didn't know what he meant until really very recently. But I got involved in the environment because I was 16. I was looking for something to do with my life. I was looking for the right cause and seeing nothing better than to save the world was as big as a cause as it came. So that's why I got into it. I also grew up next to, I was next to an apple orchard. And this was the white flight area where everybody was coming, where I was, okay? Cherry Hill was orchards and open space. Well, I lived at the top of a watershed. I spent all my time in the woods there. It was only later, that the rest of these items came into me. So I really came into this from a love of the environment, a love of the natural areas. Hey, my grandfather was a farmer too, so that's also deep in my roots. And it wasn't until they wanted to develop that particular ground that I really joined the movement as a NIMBY, not in my backyard. And I worked from ages 17 to 23 to save that piece of ground, which is open today, 40 years later. So, my experience in the environment, it really was from a traditional environmental point of view. I was recruited by Charles Lee and Ben Chavis, and I met Bernice Miller back then too, into the environmental justice movement in 1991 when the first People of Color Congress. At the time, they described me as having a legitimate background because I was the one there that had the environmental studies degree and all the years in it already, even at that point in time. I mean, I saw this start even much earlier. There was Minorities Organized for Renewable Energy in 1978. So like so many other things, we were there long before. And one last point I'll make and let you go on, but if you look at how the environmental movement started in the Nixon administration, it would have been a very different thing had it started with Democrats, because Gaylord Nelson, if you listen to any of his old speeches, was talking about the importance of looking at Vietnam, poverty, and people. It would have had a different start. It probably would have started with an environmental sustainability focus instead of a monetizing environmental cleanup from the very beginning and turning it into, it's been a failure. I mean, environmental law was designed to clean everything up by 1984, that we have to reinvent the whole thing. And environmental justice is the reinvention.
It's funny, I'd read about that recently too, how Nixon, he didn't even know what the EPA was. He wasn't really familiar with how it was going to work. It's just he knew it was something that he felt forced to do, the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, which has been completely dismantled and deconstructed. It's just an agency in name only. Professor, you write in this really beautiful, eloquent essay in Transformations magazine recently. It's entitled Black Ecologies, Tidewater, Virginia, and I'm just quoting you here. My senses of seeing and writing about matters of place were configured in rural Tidewater, Virginia, where people invoke a different register of temporality in their negotiation of territory. Structures consumed by fire long ago are regularly and casually invoked to orient someone in need of directions. And this landscape in which I was reared, inhabited by the past and present, offers me a narrative frame to examine Black ecologies and the complex interplay of Black death and Black vitality. Expound on that, because you talk about those first moments, being a young person, being a young Black man growing up in rural Virginia. And I can kind of connect with that a little bit. My family, my mother's family being from Virginia, and I had to, make those occasional summer trips or spring trips down there. But talk about that and how that brought you to this moment now where you're talking about Black ecologies. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with an abiding appreciation for the landscape of the Tidewater. And I've subsequently had to unlearn the idea that it was a pristine landscape. That took me a long time to realize that farms and fields, farm fields and tree farms are sites of extraction, violent extraction, and not just simply green and it's wonderful. But I grew up with a real attention to the kind of slow processes of the water and the landscapes in that area. And I carried that forward with me. I went to an environmental high school for 11th and 12th grade in high school, the Chesapeake Bay Governor School.
They actually have those. I didn't realize. I didn't realize they had environmental high schools. Right.
We have one in the Tidewater.
Wow.
And we focus. It's a three. It's a what Virginia calls governor schools. So it's supposed to get you dual enrollment credit, and I really enrolled for that. Like I need, much like Majora was discussing. It was like I grew up in a community in a whole town that either you leave or you're stuck, right? People don't view it as a place that you can live in a kind of meaningful way, especially if you're Black. So I think really the kind of definitive moment for me activating all of that information was Katrina in 2005. I was a second year undergraduate, and it just struck me like everything that I had grown up kind of understanding and knowing about the interface between water and land, but also just like a growing budding political consciousness erupted in that moment with watching thousands of people, stranded by the government on their roofs, clamoring for necessary aid and water and all of that. And I haven't been able to push any of that back down since. So I think like there's a book to be written at some point about a kind of Katrina cohort of radicalization around the environment, because at least 3 or 4 other people who I know, who I do this work with, including Dr. Justin Hosby at Emory, we were all activated in this kind of way by Katrina. So I would say that that's primarily my.
That was a tipping point.
Yeah, that was my tipping point.
That was a tipping point. When we are, Marjorie, I think this is very important. I appreciate this conversation, right, or that portion of the conversation that we're having this hour, because I think it's important for listeners to hear, for people who are tuning into this discussion, to hear like, okay, how this leadership starts, and that it took place or it manifested during very personal moments, very emotional moments for all of you, to show that this is not just something that's an academic exercise. This is something very personal, very emotional, something very moving. Once again, environmental injustice is an attack on our spaces, the spaces that we live in and the spaces that we eat off. And I want to ask you all about how much is the racism worsening as a result of the distressed and deteriorating state of the environment. Majora, because I think people need to make that connection, because like you see in the recent election, you see polls of Black voters who are listing racial injustice as their top concern and priority for obvious reasons, right? Because of the moment that we're in. But it's interesting, most of us probably haven't made that direct linkage with the state of the environment. The state of the environment, climate crisis, for example, like what you said, Professor, with Hurricane Katrina, that makes the racism worse. That makes the racial injustice worse. But go ahead, Majora.
Yeah, I don't think the racism was ever not there. Right. I think what we have now is just, whether it's social media and the way the media is picking up on it, is that folks actually feel licensed to bare their souls in ways that I think people just felt like you just didn't do it. To that extent. I mean, there is, after a while, it's true. You're so used to being like, smacked around, you just kind of get used to it. And I know, I'll be the first to admit, I know I kind of just expected it. It's like, I'm a Black woman trying to do this work. I'm a Black woman being an environmentalist, and then a Black woman going into real estate. Oh yeah, I like a challenge. But it is what it is. But I do think that now, folks are really like feeling like, no, and we absolutely owe it to ourselves and to everybody else, our people, as well as and other folks owe it to us to recognize that everybody's been complicit in doing what's been happening. So what I do feel a little more hopeful about right now than I did before, is the fact that it does seem like it's been raised to a level of consciousness that I don't think other folks had before. Now, the question is, how are we going to take full advantage of that in support of our communities?
That's right.
That's all I'm worried about.
Right. How do we act on it? Yeah, Marie's going to you on that. Like, how do we help people make that linkage, right? So then we can start acting on it. You know, this is now we're going to get into the call to action portion of this conversation, where people are realizing that everything environmental intersects with all these issues that we see right now, all these tragedies that are before us. And this is why we have to act on this. This is why we have to move on this. I mean, you can make the argument that environmental injustice is at the core of all these different troubles and issues that are ailing us, that are plaguing us as a people.
You know, I think that one thing that we do, funny because this comes right out of my early training and education with this stuff, there is no separation between people and the environment. We are part of the environment. We act as if we landed here from outer space and it's not for it. It's all the same thing. To me, racism is just a social manifestation of how we've treated the planet. That, you know, we own the place, that we have to start by, it's empowerment that has to happen. It's what Marjorie is doing. I was so just blown away by your presentation, Marjorie. I came in the middle because that's where we need to go. It's about developing a love for the place and owning it and making it ours, you know, and transforming it. In nature, they talk about rewilding a place because we can't go back to natural. Well, it's that rewilding experience we're doing in our own community. You know, as I have spent my time, I always tell people, you know, I didn't grow up in the underserved community. I didn't grow up there. I'm discovering it. That in my work that I'm doing right now, I have to understand Philadelphia and I have to understand how people are living here. So I've been exploring it in ways that I never have in the 30 plus years that I've lived here. And as I'm finding out, people love their neighborhoods. They love their communities. They don't want to leave. They want the communities for themselves. And it really is about empowering and learning that you have power and that you can take possession of this place. You need to not believe what you're being told you have to have or you can't do. And it starts right there. It starts right there. And you own it and you want to live in a place that is healthy, that is clean, that is attractive. You want to bring nature back, that landfill, that dump that Marjorie turned back into a park.
That's right.
That's an expression of love for the place.
Yeah.
The action of cleaning it up and turning it is an expression. And you see it everywhere. It's happening all over right now. The big fight is who is going to own movements, because it's happening. It's going to happen whether we do it or it's done to us. It's going to happen. It is happening now. And that we need to understand that we need to vote, that we need to own our locations. And environment, it's all of its environment, okay? The fact that we see environmental justice as something we need to deal with is just a redefining of things that were said in the Black liberation time. It's just using new words to describe the same circumstances. That's what I've observed over the last 30 years. There hasn't been much that's new. You invoked Buckminster Fuller. I had a chance to meet Buckminster Fuller. He was one of my founding heroes in the work that I was doing because he knew how to see. And it really is about becoming woke. You know, it's about becoming woke. It's about saying, this is mine and I'm going to make it mine. I'm going to take care of here, because there is no such place as away. You can't leave. All you can do is go and take whatever you had and it comes right with you. And where you are becomes where you were. And that's what's happening with everybody on this planet right now. That is, you know, this whole capitalism thing started by deciding that only people who could be bought and sold were Black, you know, in the 1400s. You know, it all began there. And the basis of European wealth is that they got it from us for free for so many times. And that's over. And we have to reclaim it. We have to decide that we're going to make where we are ours, and we're going to build the standard of life we want here. We're going to clean up the mess, because you can't get away from it.
And you know, and in talking about that too, when we get to that point where we, you know, finally make that stand, where we resolve to own the spaces that we're in, Professor, what is that advice that you would give to, you know, that young, impressionable brother or sister who is looking at what's happening around them, the space that's happening around them, and this might be something that they want to get. They don't know how to exactly articulate it, but how to get involved, right? Especially these days in that movement, in that environmental justice movement. And it's much more than environmental justice, right? It's like what Maurice was saying. Everything is all environments, all intertwined. So what is that advice? And I'll go around the table too. Like, what's that entry point to get involved in a movement or to create a movement yourself to lead in this?
I think that there are plenty of ways to get involved, and I think we need all hands on deck. I mean, we're at a critical point where, of course, the polar ice caps are melting. Coronavirus and deforestation is bringing new viruses and bacteria into circulation in human populations. That's about deforestation for industrial farming, where it's very clear that the kind of politics of oil are tied to imperial violence, and also the violence of both the processing of petroleum, and we know Cancer Alley and all of these other kinds of spaces. We need all hands on deck. I think we need artists, we need activists and organizers, we need intellectuals, we need everyone to be doing this kind of work. And I think that kind of openness allows for people to bring their skills. And I think ordinary Black people have been engaged in the kind of mutual aid networks that we need to build new kinds of infrastructures. I mean, in Virginia, since slavery, but up through now, poor Black people in my community would not have food if they didn't look out for each other, right? I mean, there's never been a kind of moment where us feeding one another and looking out for each other in those kinds of ways haven't been critical. I think we also have to, back to this earlier question of how we are connecting all of the dots. I think one of the things that we really need to do in terms of activating consciousness about the environment in relation to racism is actually activate some of the histories of slavery that Maurice was discussing. Slavery was an environmental catastrophe. First of all, if you look at what happened in the West African context with the state formations that were created in response to growing Atlantic trade, you get the kind of shift from Sahel cities to coastal cities, and with that massive deforestation and the transformation of those landscapes. In the context of the Middle Passage, you get large. I mean, there's all kinds of accounts of large, deep water sharks that follow ships all the way to Jamaica, right? So there's a whole re-scrambling of people, place, and environment that happens in that context. And then, of course, plantation labor, right? We were the bodies that were tasked through starvation and the whip to clear forests and to replant all of that with monoculture, right? With tobacco in Virginia, with cotton, sugar, all of the indigo, all of the kinds of those kinds of crops. Wow. So I mean, as we're talking about, and as we're seeing the kind of mainstreaming of radical abolition when it comes to incarceration, and people connecting the dots there back to slavery, I think we can do a similar kind of work around the environment. I think we must, and I think we also have to see those kinds of points as connected. I think when we talk about ecological catastrophes, prisons are ecological catastrophes, right? When we, in Virginia, they blow the tops off of mountains like they used to for coal to put prisons. I think also the oil industry funds policing organizations, right? There's a significant amount of work that shows that the oil industry is invested in prisons and jails and the military, and of course the military, right? And so I think part of how we can recenter environmentalism as not white, as not any of those things, and tie it to these kinds of histories is by really returning to these kind of originary moments. And think about when Dominion was articulated, what that meant, that European settlers said, this land is mine, and then needed people to work it. And that, I think, we've seen the emergence of the Anthropocene, at least in terms of the ways that we discuss in academic circles, the Anthropocene discussion, right? Where all of a sudden, all of us are equally responsible for the destruction of the planet. For the first time, we equal. But I think there are other frameworks to help us think through that, like racial capitalism, like people's, Francois Verge's, or plantationocene, other visions that help us to really actually think about when does this epochal moment of ecological destruction begin? And so I'm not sure I'm hitting the target of your question, but I'm kind of talking.
No, you are, because I never thought about it like that, and I'm sure a lot of other folks who are listening have never thought about it like that, about how we tie this to that history of enslavement of our ancestors, and how that could prompt people, that could push people to think about this differently. We actually have to now have to go to break. Unfortunately, we have to end this conversation. I had to give Professor J.T. Rohn the last word on this. I could go another hour or two with this conversation, to be honest with you, because it's very fascinating. So at some point, we're going to make another hour or two on this program and others. We've been talking with Majora Carter, who's an urban revitalization strategist, MacArthur Fellow and Peabody Award-winning broadcaster. The Majora Carter Group, go to majoracartergroup.com for more information. You gave us a wonderful presentation earlier on, and I'm supposed to get a copy of that PowerPoint as a point of reference, and we can share it with our WURD listening audience. Also, you just heard from Professor J.T. Rohn, founder of the Black Ecologies Initiative at Arizona State University. Go to ihr.asu.edu/black-ecologies for more information there. And I suspect Professor Rohn will be a regular guest here on WRD, especially on Reality Check and on our EcoWord programming. And we've been talking to Maurice Sampson, Philly-based grassroots environmental activist, strategist, unsustainable waste management expert, and chair of the Recycle Now Philadelphia campaign. He's been joining us here on EcoWord, our Environmental Justice Summit, on our Pioneers of the Environmental Justice Movement. We didn't have enough time to discuss all this, but definitely very, very moving at the end, Professor. You gave me some food for thought there, and how we all need to look at this a lot differently. And then, Majora, I see comments from your presentation earlier in our Facebook Live WURD TV section. People saying self-gentrification, that's the way to go. They had a major moment, like an aha moment, a nirvana moment that just happened during your presentation. And Marisa Sampson, as always, great to have your perspective here on WURD. Just very inspiring work that you're doing in Philadelphia, in the Delaware Valley and beyond. So it's really been a pleasure and an honor to be joined by all three of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Honor to be with you.
All right, take care. We'll be talking with you again. For sure. Okay, let's take a break, and we're continuing our all-day long Indigenous Peoples Day Environmental Justice Summit here on WURD. I'm Charles Ellison. When we come back, we're going to have a discussion with Karen Young, Executive Director of Fairmont Waterworks, on how we achieve optimal water quality. But that's not just about water quality, that's about safe, healthy, accessible water for everyone, and the role that the Fairmont Waterworks plays in achieving that. That's coming up next here on EcoWord's Environmental Justice Summit on 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Just stay tuned. We'll be right back.
To African Americans, what do you have to lose?
More than we could have ever imagined. Trump's policies make black people less safe, and his downplaying of coronavirus cost black lives. It's time to elect someone who cares about us, Joe Biden. Joe will fight racism and injustice everywhere. He'll expand Obamacare and rebuild our economy so it works for all of us. Request a ballot now. Make a plan to vote. Our lives depend on it.
Paid for by Ask Me People, which is responsible for the content of this ad. AskMePeople.org. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee.
New Voices for Reproductive Justice is registering black women and their families in Philly to vote. The general election is on November 3rd. You can register to vote online at rock.vote/newvoices. That's rock.vote/newvoices. The deadline to register is October 19th. If you need assistance registering to vote, visit newvoicesrj.org.
I'm Joe Biden.
candidate for president, and I approve this message.
But they've got the experience.
I'm still in shock 3 or 4 years later that we're in this position now. Our democracy is at a pivotal point.
From the top, we don't trust our government. We see the trouble we're in economically. We've got 170,000 Americans dead, and yet this president will do anything he can to make it seem like things are better than they are.
I did more for the black community than anybody with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln.
It's our responsibility. If we don't lead that effort to make things better, we can't ask other people to do it. There is no good reason not to vote.
Right, we need to have individuals that are in office like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
They are our best shot to take us forward.
And that's what makes me incredibly hopeful, but we really do have to work for this thing.
To the thousands who did not vote, we need you to show up for our future and for our country.
You cannot sit on the sidelines. You got to get in the game.
Paid for by Biden for president.
Pico has many ways to help you lower your energy usage and save money at home. Here's one. If your heating and cooling system is more than 20 years old, it may be time for your contractor to replace it with a high-efficiency Energy Star certified model. You'll get a rebate from Pico and save on your monthly electric bill. You'll find a list of new heating and cooling system rebates at pico.com/rebates. Or you can call 1-888-5-PICO-SAVE for all the details. Plus, find instant discounts on smart thermostats and more at pico.com/marketplace. There's free shipping on orders over $49.
Everyone has a different journey to their vote, but we all take the same steps. If you want to vote, register by October 19th. If you want to vote by mail, apply now and mail your ballot back as early as possible, before November 3rd. Or bring it to a satellite election office. If you want to vote in person, go to your polling location on November 3rd. However you want to vote, we'll help you find the way. Visit PhiladelphiaVotes.com.
Reverend Tyler, with November 3rd around the corner, do you know how you'll be voting this year?
Dr. Callahan, I requested my mail-in ballot, and I'm returning it the day it comes in the mail.
That's perfect, because we can't leave anything to chance this year.
Already received your mail-in ballot? You're just a few simple steps away from turning your mailbox into a ballot box. Here's how. After selecting your candidates, place your marked ballot into the small secrecy envelope and seal it. It's a 2-envelope process, so then you'll place the small secrecy envelope into the larger one. Make sure to seal that one too. Sign and date it, and then it's as simple as dropping it in your mailbox, no postage necessary, or returning it to your county election office. And if you still want to sign up to vote by mail or find out where to drop off your mail-in ballot, visit votespa.com.
I'm not waiting until November 3rd. I'm returning my mail-in ballot the day it comes in the mail.
Or you can return your ballot to your county election office.
I've got my plan. Make your plan to vote today.
Paid for by Power Interfaith.
This is Pastor Alan Waller, and I want to remind you of the immortal words of Pastor Leon Sullivan, not burn, baby, burn, but build, baby, build. Since 1968, the Sullivan Progress Plaza has been the place of entrepreneurship in the black community. We are still building, baby, build. And we want to invite you to come along with us if you seek to invest in our community and make a difference in the new world that we're going to create. For more information, call 215-232-7070. I want to invite you to be a part of the new future of Philadelphia.
Hey guys, Tony Staten here, host of the Labor's Live radio show. And I have a question for all of the Labor's District Council union members and WURD listeners. Is your election checklist completed? Well, let's see. Is everyone of age in your household registered to vote? Is your mail-in ballot application completed? Have you confirmed your polling place for in-person voting? And do you know the names of the candidates running for office in your area? Well, if you've answered no to any of these questions, go to votespa.com for more information. And remember, exercise your right to vote. Your livelihood depends on it.
Don't forget to tune into Labor's Live every Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. on WURD, WURD.
Spend your evenings with Nick Taliaferro and Sincerely Sarita. Beginning Tuesday, October 13th, catch Nick Taliaferro as he returns to WURD Radio, Monday through Thursday, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m., followed by Sincerely Sarita from 7 p.m. till 9 p.m. Nick Taliaferro and Sincerely Sarita, exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Streaming live on WURDradio.com, the WURD Radio app, or watch live on WURD TV via Facebook and YouTube. Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on WURD Radio and WURDradio.com.
All right, so there's a number of ways that you can join in on the discussion, and you can submit questions. One way you can do that is on the Facebook live stream on WURD TV at facebook.com/4word. Also, #EcoWord, #EcoWord. We need to do a more intentional, better job of activating that, but #EcoWord on social media, especially on Twitter. I'm already there at #EcoWord. You can see small clips, pieces of the conversations we've had over the past over 2 hours now here during our Environmental Justice Summit, our special program, a special day-long programming on environmental justice, on how we can fully achieve it, how we can fully defeat environmental injustice, environmental racism. We're doing that at ecoword.com. Had a great panel just now before our break, and then we had definitely had a great presentation from Majora Carter. We even had some live music a little bit earlier on. I'm Charles Ellison. You can email me questions as well at cellison@wordradio.com, but all throughout the day. And there'll be some moments where you'll be able to call in as well and participate in the discussion and submit questions there. But if you have questions or comments or feedback, and I see a few of you already are reacting to it at our live stream on WURD TV on facebook.com/4word, and we appreciate that. So we'll get to that shortly. I do want to introduce Karen Young. She's Executive Director of Fairmont Waterworks. So more information at fairmontwaterworks.org. And many people don't know the Fairmont Waterworks is the region's premier urban environmental education destination. It's actually already been recognized by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection as the Delaware River Basin's official watershed education center. It's also the gateway center for the Schuylkill River National and State Heritage Area. And here to talk about Fairmont Waterworks, what it does and the issues that it's focused on, and how we also just achieve safer, healthier, more accessible water, is Karen Young. Karen, how are you doing? Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you, Charles.
Excellent, excellent. Talk to us about Fairmont Waterworks, what you do, and the role that it plays in helping preserve and protect Philadelphia waterways.
Sure. Well, you gave us a really good introduction just a few seconds ago. What people may not realize is that it's a National Historic Landmark. It's sort of nondescript. A lot of times we're off the beaten path, but it is absolutely one of those places that once you're there, you understand its significance in Philadelphia's cultural history and in the establishment of safe, potable drinking water for all Philadelphians. It's been in its current location in the buildings that some of us recognize as Greek architecture, beautiful landscaping, since the 1800s, and has provided a public service since that time. So you might imagine that in its early years, it was a pumping station that provided clean, safe drinking water. Towards its middle period, it was an aquarium. It was one of the first aquariums in the country. After that, it became a swimming pool that was one of the first in Philadelphia to be a desegregated swimming pool. And then our life began as a museum. So its history is grounded as much in providing safe drinking water as it is in providing a public space. And we're really proud of the fact that it's a Philadelphia landmark. It belongs to Philadelphians. It's in our backyards. We just need more people to come and visit and understand what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's a real important piece of everyone's Philadelphia childhood is that architecture and that pumping station. A lot of people not realizing what that is when they see that, particularly if they're going along the highway, Schuylkill Expressway, or either one of the river drives, and they're seeing that architecture and they're not exactly knowing what it is, but that's Fairmont Waterworks. And so the Fairmont Waterworks, that's like the second, in a way, technically it's the second municipal water authority in Philadelphia. I mean, it's just right behind, like Philadelphia Water Department is like the key operating municipal water department in the city, but this is a part of Philadelphia city government in many respects. Talk about a little bit more about that history, because you just hinted at it, how at one time it was the only water pumping station in the city. That was the place where you got clean water, and then obviously the water works throughout the city had to expand. The city became bigger. Talk a little bit about that history.
Well, you know what, the reality though, Charles, is that the Fairmont Waterworks historically was the city's most successful pumping station. It wasn't, as you've intimated, the first, it was the second. Wow. The first in Philadelphia is actually another landmark that all Philadelphians know about, which would be City Hall. That was actually the first pumping station in Philadelphia was Center Square.
Wow.
So you have to think about Philadelphia very small, only from river to river. What you and I know is downtown Philadelphia. Historically, that's all Philadelphia was. The rest of us was farmland, just open spaces. So Center City, Center Square, was where the heartbeat of the city was and provided water to maybe 1,000, 1,500 people at that time. Well, that pumping station was too small as the city grew. You know, you would want your city to grow, to expand. So the second pumping station began where we currently are, which is at Fairmount. So that is actually the second pumping station. The other one, too small and also very dangerous. So there was a couple of explosions. It's sort of like the mystery behind the waterworks is that, you know, the way to fire a waterworks historically was to use cords of wood. And you would burn wood, you know, like you and I might make have a fire pit out in our, you know, our patios or backyards. Well, that's how they started the waterworks, was with fire. And fire can be dangerous. So it combusted, the plant blew up a couple of times. So they had to find a safer way. So they moved the pumping station to the Fairmount Waterworks and began using safer, more emergent technologies. To stop using boilers and started using mechanical and then using water wheels to actually pump water up to what is now the Art Museum. You know, so that's the other piece about our history, that there's a connection between the historic Fairmount Waterworks and the Art Museum. So you imagine gravity is all you need to keep water flowing. We still use gravity to this day. We pump it up the hill historically to where the Art Museum's.
I hope we didn't lose Karen. Karen, are you there? Karen Young. It sounded like, and it looks like a connection issue on Karen Young's end. We're talking with Karen Young. She is the executive director of the Fairmount Waterworks, which is a museum as well. It's a museum on water in the city of Philadelphia. Go to fairmountwaterworks.org. Beautiful website, and you can learn more about how to access it. Obviously that's very difficult during this time of pandemic, but there are a number of other activities. There's virtual things you can do. It's a little interactive, the website. Go to fairmountwaterworks.org. It looks like we had a technical glitch. That was a connection issue, just, you know, a number of things that we do not have control over here at WURD or anyone else for that matter. So everyone's using broadband these days, so there's a lot of stress on those broadband lines, but we're going to see if, while we have a few more minutes, we can bring Karen Young back. Once again, executive director of Fairmount Waterworks. Once again, you can leave us comments and questions. We encourage that. We want you to do that. Send me an email. cellison@wordradio.com is my email. cellison@wordradio.com. We actually have a listener, Sharon Howard. Where can African Americans go in the city of Philadelphia to get clean water, particularly during a national emergency? And so Sharon also worried about a national emergency around the November election. But we have listeners, folks who are listening in, tuning into the discussion, many listeners, not just in Philly and the Delaware Valley, but beyond, folks tapping into our live stream at wordradio.com, also by Word TV, which you can see on youtube.com/onWURD and facebook.com/4. Oh, we have Karen Young back. There she is. But you know, just things about this technology, you know, we just don't have any control over, but I'm glad we got you back, Karen. So we have you for a few more minutes, which is good. You know, we don't really appreciate water, right, until we don't have access to it. Until we lose it, or if we do have access to it, it's not the type of clean quality water that not only that we want, but that we really need. So what's the state of water like in Philadelphia, you think, Karen, right now as you see it? You get a lay of the you know, the blue landscape, so to speak. Yes. We're brown in some respects, you know, if you look at the Schuylkill and the Delaware River, but what are strategies for protecting that water?
Yeah, you know, the biggest strategy and the most effective is that people have to become involved and concerned. And I listened in earlier to some of the conversations, and quite honestly, it's public will. It is what the public desires. I think we all have agency to push governments to do a better job of protecting our source water. So collectively, we could all do a better job. Just ringing that bell, asking our council people and asking our water utility managers, what are you doing? What are the kinds of things that you're doing to safeguard our water supply? What is it that you're doing that sort of counters what might have happened in Ferguson, you know, around lead in drinking water? What we don't, Flint, Michigan, what we don't want is people to just assume that all your drinking water supplies are clean. Some are cleaner than others. Philadelphia has done an admirable job of ensuring that every Philadelphian has access to safe, potable, affordable drinking water. It is tested every day, 7 days a week. It is tested more than most bottled water. People seem to think that bottled water is your safer option. A lot of times that's very much not the case. You would want a utility that is, one, the same people who drink the water that they're providing. And that's a piece that I think people might not quite understand. I'm a Philadelphian. I drink the same water that the rest of Philadelphians drink. So I want to make sure that my water is as safe for my family and myself as possible. So by rule, by policy, by procedure, major utilities have to notify people of all the conditions of their drinking water. So that happens on an annual basis. But again, we have the power to ask for more information. If learning about your water supply annually is not enough, then you should call. You should visit, a place like the Fairmount Waterworks and find out more. The online resource, Charles, you know how grand and robust online information can be.
Right.
You go to the Water Department website, you find all the information about your watershed, your local watershed, the city's watershed, and learn what you can so that you then can make informed choices and ask the right questions of, utility professionals.
Yeah, yeah. Lastly, that education piece, because that's a really important role that you play with Fairmount Waterworks in the museum, and even trying to do that through the website as well. And so, talk about how important like that water literacy. I mean, it's all part of a broader eco-literacy effort. It's something that we're striving for here at WURD every day, particularly with our EcoWord project, and it's something that we want to get even better at. But how that literacy piece, that education piece is important, and not just for when we wait till we become grown-up adults and we're starting to pay the water bill and suddenly we become more sensitive to water issues, but this has to start when we're children, when we're kids. It has to start as soon as we start thinking about water. We see it, we touch it, we drink it. Okay, well, how do we appreciate it and how do we protect it?
Right. You're absolutely right. It cannot wait until you get a water bill, or worse yet, till someone comes and wants to shut your water off. That's not when you want to begin to understand what happens. So the water literacy quotient in Philadelphia is actually relatively high. We start at a very young age in trying to educate our constituents about safe drinking water, and about wastewater, and about stormwater. It actually happens, believe it or not, we have pre-K programs. So we actually just refer to it in sort of like internally as growing up green. We want people to not just turn that faucet on and assume. We want you to know from a very early age, programming from pre-K, lifelong learners. But one thing I wanted to mention, Charles, is that the Fairmount Waterworks is only one of 23 centers, part of an alliance. So collectively, there are 23 other centers like ours running across 3 states. Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, all trying to do the same thing, all trying to educate their constituents who are adults, but also trying to educate, constituents of all ages, and really trying to engage young people at the middle school level and the high school level to become leaders in this movement, so that they then become the ones that take that messaging back home and they're working in their communities to educate even more. We recognize that individually, each of our centers are doing a really good job, but we found that coming together and doing this collective impact would really do the ripple effect, where we'd have a higher, a higher quotient of water literacy throughout our entire watershed.
We've been talking with Karen Young. She's Executive Director of Fairmount Waterworks. Go to fairmountwaterworks.org for more information, and also see how you can get involved and see how, and obviously water is going to be a big deal too, not just in terms of how much you drink and how much you access it, but we're dealing East Coast city like Philly, when we're dealing with rising sea levels. We're already dealing with the consequences of flooding, so it kind of makes us look at water differently, and we got to kind of balance. We have to figure that out too. And I know that there's a lot of different innovative ideas at play in projects. We got to bring you back on, Karen, to talk a little bit about that. Things that the city of Philadelphia is doing that's kind of a first time for a lot of cities, as they're trying to deal with flooding and how to manage water and storm water. But we're going to bring you back, Karen. We ran on time. Karen Young, go to fairmountwaterworks.org for more information, or at Fairmount WW on social media. Karen, thanks for your time this afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Charles.
And thank you for that work. Appreciate you. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back on the other side, we'll take phone calls and just see if folks are connecting the dots while we're having these conversations about environmental justice and about how we achieve it completely. We're going to be doing this programming all day, so we just want to get an opportunity to talk with you, to read some of what you've written at our Facebook live stream. We'll be coming back on our Environmental Justice Summit. It's EcoWord here on 96.1 FM, 900 AM, WURDradio.com, WURD TV, WURD app. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Have you heard about Penny? They make it easier than ever to get health coverage.
What if I'm self-employed?
Penny gets you covered.
Unemployed?
Penny gets you covered.
What about my family?
Penny gets them covered too.
But will this fit into my budget?
Penny can connect you to financial help to lower the cost.
Really? Where do I go?
Easy. Just go to PENNIE.com or call 1-844-844-8040.
Dietz & Watson has been making premium meats and artisan cheeses for over 80 years. And when it comes to stacking sandwiches and party platters, they've got something for everyone in the family, like maple honey turkey breast, American cheese, buffalo chicken, and more. So get to your local deli and taste 4 generations of family recipes. With Dietz & Watson on the table, you'll have everyone coming back for seconds and thirds. Dietz & Watson, it's a family thing since 1939. Keystone First VIP Choice HMO SNP Dual Eligible Special Needs Plan has a 4 out of 5 star rating and is one of the highest rated Medicare plans in the region. Keystone First VIP Choice and you are better together. If you live in Philadelphia, Bucks, Chester, Montgomery, or Delaware County, and you have both Medicare and Medicaid, choose the Medicare plan that is working to help you get better care. Enjoy extra benefits at no cost to you with Keystone First VIP Choice. You get benefits like dental, vision, and transportation to and from your medical appointments. They also cover a fitness membership to a gym of your choice. $150 toward over-the-counter pharmacy items. There's no copay for doctor's visits. They offer a large provider network, a great prescription plan, dental coverage, and even eyeglasses. Plus, you don't have to wait for open enrollment. You can change your coverage every quarter. Keystone First VIP Choice. The name you trust, the service you deserve. Call Keystone First VIP Choice today at 1-877-686-1760 or visit KeystoneFirstVIPChoice.com.
Always Best Care is a great place to work. Flexibility,
leadership, purpose,
great benefits.
There's never a dull moment.
Diversity,
inclusion,
compasión.
We love our jobs. If you're looking for a great place to work, you can join our compassionate Team Green. You can apply online at teamgreenabc.com or call 267-909-9248.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Reality Check with Charles Ellison right now on Word Radio and WordRadio.com.
Okay, well, we got some moments here. 215-634-8065. Toll free, it is 866-361-0900. Got open phone lines right now. Let us know what you think about this programming, how it is touching you, how it is affecting you in ways that it's affecting me. As there's giving me food for thought. It's moving me to sort of to act on this, to think about it, to produce content for you much more differently as we're going through this Environmental Justice Summit. This is our second Environmental Justice Summit. It doesn't feel like it, right? Because it seems like we always focus on something, some piece of the environment. We have a conversation around it every day here on WURD, and that's intentional because we do that as a part of our EcoWord Environmental Justice Journalism Project. Go to ecoword.com for more there. This EcoWord Environmental Justice Summit, by the way, is done in conjunction with, in partnership with our good friends at Bartram's Garden. So go to bartramsgarden.org for more there. Also, the From the Source Reporting Collaborative has helped with this, and all of it being supported by PICO, the Watershed Education Alliance, the Linfest Institute, and the William Penn Foundation as well, our supporters who've made this day-long series of talks and activities possible here on WURD. 215-634-8065, toll-free 866-361-0900. Let me go to Woody at the barbershop calling us here on EcoWord. Woody, how are you doing, sir?
Hey, man, barbershops are closed on Mondays.
That's right. Yes. Why are you calling from the barbershop? Right. You shouldn't even be at the barbershop.
I'm not supposed to be here, but WURD
right.
is doing such a fantastic job. Things like this you don't hear about anywhere in the country.
No, you don't.
Just appreciate that, man.
Thank you.
I can't wait until we all can understand each other's environments. A young man was coming in, and I told him I was closed today, but I had to educate him a little bit when he came in because he's at the end of 12th grade. He doesn't know where he wants to go and so forth and so on. But his parents gave him a pretty good education, like you. See, he didn't go to the inner city schools. And he now is trying to make up his mind because he sees things are out of balance. So I was telling him to go home and turn this on and start listening to it. I said, because you got to remember, there's an environment not really talked about, and that's the environment of a non-reader, a person ignorant walking in these streets today as we speak, who cannot take an application and fill it out, who cannot fill out an application for a job, who will not be able to vote if they didn't have the straight ticket. All of these things I talk about continually now. The earliest news has something about barbershops pertaining to telling people to go vote. And I've been saying all this time, you need the machines, because these are new machines, and show just the people who possibly want to vote how to use them. I mean, there's not much time left now. You only got a couple of days, and I've been talking about this since January because I brought the machines into my barbershop. So I would appreciate, Charles, anything you could do to possibly get a place where people can actually look at these machines and know what they're up against when they come in to vote, because many of them cannot read.
And, you know, and Woody, thanks for that too. That's a good reminder. That's something we're going to ask the Philadelphia City Commissioner Lisa Dealey. Actually, is scheduled to be on tomorrow, and we keep the phone lines open. So make sure you stay tuned for that, because it would be great even if you could call in and you could ask that question or engage her with that question.
I will definitely do that. I'm sitting here looking at an old article from the Philadelphia Daily News that I wrote February 27th, 1997, and it's talking about Hornbeck, the superintendent of schools. Exactly what I just explained to you. 1997, Charles. I'm talking about the same thing. Philadelphia Daily News, February 27th. 1997. It's written by me, Robert Woodard, and they call me the Winfield Barber. But what can I tell you, man? I'm trying.
Yeah, you know, and Woody too, Commissioner Dealey, she's going to be on at the top of the show tomorrow. She's scheduled, at least that's what I'm saying here in the rundown. So yeah, and folks should listen, and we're going to be talking with Philadelphia City Commissioner Lisa Dealey tomorrow at 10 o'clock at the top. She's scheduled. So I hope because she just heard your question, Woody, that suddenly she doesn't make it, but I'm sure she will. She always comes on. We always appreciate her time, but please call in and nudge us and remind us, and we'll have the phone lines open when she does, because that's very important, particularly as we're so few days away now from the election on November 3rd, and there's a lot of questions surrounding that. But we'll get into it definitely tomorrow. Thank you, Woody. I'm gonna let you go. So let me take this next caller out of Colorado. Is Derek. Derek, welcome to EcoWord.
Yeah, well, like I said, I want to be too. Like real quick, Charles. There are some things you may or may not be aware of. I mean, when China stopped taking our plastic, and now the companies in this, they were talking about some places are looking to take their plastic, and a lot of times they're going to some of these African countries, and so now they're starting to trash up some of these African countries, and I probably can't do too much about this. This making people aware of it. So I was looking at some newspaper article, they were showing all this plastic, and it was from this country, and how they're trying to do something like making plastic. I guess they're trying to make it eat itself or something like that. That's another thing. Is it's this plastic and resources, and how is that? And when they did, I was looking at some other things when they're recycling plastic, where it's really going, and a lot of times it lands up in landfills and the water, but it's really starting to mess up some of those African countries, like in the Nairobi River in Kenya.
Right.
And that was one of my concerns too. So this is not more than, this is a lot further than we just think about it as being a U.S. issue, but this is starting to go worldwide, especially, and it's starting to trash out of some of the African countries. And Kenya, the Nairobi River, and some of the other places they have there in Africa too. So
on top of already the climate crisis and global warming stress that much of the African continent is going through, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, and just kind of dealing with that. Some of actually the majority of major, we don't hear enough of this. We talk about those California wildfires, obviously, and we should be concerned about that, and we should figure out a way to mitigate that, and also we have to figure out a way to help populations, and especially vulnerable populations already in those western states, to get away from that or address that. But actually, the largest number of wildfires or forest fires that are happening throughout the world are on the African continent right now. So, a lot of people don't realize that. And so, because we typically, we're talking about the West Coast now. We're talking about obviously what's happening in places like South America and the Amazon and Brazil and the deforestation that's happening there. But I know it was, I think it was, I know it was last summer. And I think going into a little bit of, it might have calmed down a bit going into a little bit of 2020. That's where the largest amount of forest fires were taking place. So, definitely is something that we have to pay attention to.
One other question: do you when you guys do recycling in Philadelphia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have any idea of when you're doing your electronics or you're recycling your plastic, where the final destination? Have you guys ever done it?
Yeah. It's a very good. Yeah, that's a very good question. I myself specifically do not know, like, where it specifically does that, like, recycling end up at. I wish we had, like, Maurice Sampson back, because he had a little bit more insight into that. I know there's been some controversy around it, but that's been a problem as of late for the past couple of years with this trade war we're having with China. It's affecting even cities like Philadelphia. People don't know where to put, like, their recycled material, and also a lot of those that much more hazardous electronic waste. So I don't know. I know that there's different, like, places, locations throughout the southeast PA region where that trash is dumped, where that recycling ends up. But that's a great Maurice Sampson question. Like, I don't have technical knowledge about that.
That'd be really good, because I tried to find out where mine was coming from, and then I started asking questions about the plastics, and I asked the things about electronics, and so they said they wanted you to take it someplace on the other side of the city, and you pay them some money, and then that they're recycling, like, the old TVs.
Right.
And the cords and everything else like that. Fortunately, you got to pay for it, but at least you know that it's going. The cord of the people in the city is going to the right things, and they're taking the solid state TVs, not the flat screens. Nobody wants the big tube things anymore.
Right.
But I wish you'd do some more study on that. The plastic, and where's the recycling going on in like in your area, and because I know what's going on where it's going on in my area.
Yeah, and and more information too. And thanks for raising that too, Derek. I'm gonna have to let you go because we're going to break. But go to PhiladelphiaStreets.com, and they have information on just for, like, listener edification right now. They have information on, like, getting rid of specific hazardous waste, like computers and electronics. And batteries, giving you some tips on that, or things like small propane cylinders, fire extinguishers, paint. People don't think about these things and the kind of impact that they would have on them. All right, I'm going to this ends my segment, or my section of this day-long EcoWord Environmental Justice Summit. Thanks, Derek, for calling in and listening, and too from Colorado. Thanks, everyone, for listening in. I'll be back a little bit later on. I'm going to hand the mic over to Tara Roberts and Ken Stewarts. They will be talking about environmental journalism next. That's coming up next very shortly here on EcoWord Environmental Justice Summit. I'm supposed to be back at around 3 p.m. for our environmental justice policy conversation. We got State Representatives Donna Bullock, State Representative Chris Rabb, Malcolm Kenyatta. Also, I'm hoping Councilwoman Cindy Bass is supposed to be joining us as well, but I'm getting some conflicting information about her schedule, but we'll work it out by 3 o'clock. So I'll be back here at 3 o'clock, and then I come back on at 7 p.m., 7 to 9 p.m. A little bit more open phone line action will be taking place as we continue our ongoing environmental justice summit here during Indigenous Peoples Day on WURD 96.1 FM, 900 AM. We got Andrea Lawful Sanders. She's coming up next. She's going to be having that conversation with Tara Roberts and Ken Stewarts about environmental journalism. So that's coming up next. So stay tuned in. Normally it's The Source, but we're continuing with our EcoWord Environmental Justice Summit. We got Andrea Lawful Sanders coming up next here on EcoWord 96.1 FM, 900 AM, wordradio.com, Word TV, Word app. All right, stay tuned. We'll be right back, and we'll go to Andrea Lawful Sanders.